This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Left, a weekly, proudly progressive podcast, and making sure that you get your perpetuation of liberal entitlement.
Let's get your rim shot for that.
Yeah. Thank you to Antonin Scalia for our catchy new tagline. We like
Talking
to
Left,
Yeah.
a perpetuation of your progressive entitlement.
We like to go over the news that you may have missed this week or that we think needs a little bit more attention. Starting with just the latest Republican over in California to really step in it about women not being able to become pregnant after a rape. Yes, Celeste Gregg. He is a California Republican from the GOP's Spring Convention, which is the California Republican Assembly, a group Ronald Reagan once called the conscience of the Republican Party. Ironically, Gregg was attempting to criticize former Missouri U.S. Senate candidate Todd Akin for his legitimate rape comment, and instead he stepped in it himself by saying he should have come back and apologized, but granted, the percentage of pregnancies due to rape is small because it's an act of violence, because the body is traumatized.
So in other words, I agree.
In other words, he should have apologized, but he was correct.
But this is the way to really say it.
Yes.
That isn't so wait, it is just as offensive.
Right. Good job there, Celeste Gregg. Yes. Obviously, Democrats were quickly criticizing his comments, like Nancy Skinner, a Democrat assemblywoman from Berkeley, California, said, "It's just outrageous, beyond absurd. It's insulting. It's the same line of thinking of, quote, if we just dress differently or behave differently, we won't get raped." And the interesting thing is that Mercury News, an online news source, went through actual medical studies.
I was just about to do that.
In reference to this comment, and found that the majority of research says that rates of pregnancy after a rape are pretty much the same as, any other consensual sex.
Well, remember, a lot of these people went to abstinence-only education programs when they were in high school, so they don't know actually how bodies work. I swear.
True. And one study they found from the journal Human Nature actually says that the per-incident rape pregnancy rate is twice that of consensual sex, because during consensual sex, you have the option of using birth control. They find that pregnancy after a rape occurs 6.42% of the time, while per incident pregnancy rate of consensual sex is only 3.1%.
Per incident?
So, yes.
How romantic.
Yes. Doesn't that just...
Per incident.
Yeah. So it does appear that Gregg somehow was trying to back away from Todd Akin's remarks, and instead just came right out there with the anti-woman
Stepped
comment.
in the same pile.
Yeah, good job. Good job. Glad you're making Democrats' lives easy to show the vast difference between Democrats and Republicans. It's just absurd.
It is absurd.
He has since apologized for the remark.
When these apologies come out, I wonder if they actually are apologizing.
Or they're the passive, if I offended you, I'm sorry.
Or even just... I wonder if they still hold that belief after the apology. This ridiculous, unproven, actually disputed, not even disputed, proven opposite, scientifically, stand that they seem to hold on to for some reason.
You're talking about a group that still says climate change is disputable and that there's science that proves otherwise.
But it all goes down to this this trying to jibe together, wanting to block every single abortion.
Yes.
In this situation, so they have to make sure that it's such a small percentage of time in their mind in order to justify it morally in their their construct in their heads. Does that make sense?
Yes, that they're trying to essentially explain that even
if we get rid of all abortion
legislation, we don't need.
This is no big deal.
Yeah, we don't need exemptions for rape and incest.
They're trying to get that to line up in their head, in their hearts, and it's not possible.
Right. How about let women have control of their own reproductive rights?
There you go.
And then you don't have to worry about exemptions and putting your foot in your mouth like Mr. Gregg did in California.
Well summed up.
Yes. And speaking of pregnancy, Terry James, who is a 29-year-old teacher who formerly was employed at a Christian college, was apparently fired for premarital sex. You like that? Yes, Terry James was fired because she was pregnant and not married, and she had signed a contract with the school agreeing not to engage in, quote, sexually immoral behavior, including premarital sex. The really interesting part about this, and just the really slap in the face to Mrs. James, the school went on to offer her then pregnant father. I don't want to use the term baby daddy because it's just ridiculous. But yes, the man that was the father of her child, the school went on to offer him a position.
Wait, but was he already under contract?
No, he did. He was not employed by the school.
All right.
So she was fired
she broke
for
the morals
premarital.
clause.
Yes.
She broke the morals clause. They fired her.
Right.
I mean,
so
wow.
their response is to hire the guy.
Wow.
Yes, they've since been married, and she is pursuing a lawsuit with high-profile attorney Gloria Allred to sue the school. They say it is that the legal waters are murky because she signed a contract agreeing not to, But let me point something out. Just because you sign a contract that says something doesn't make it lawful. I could sign a contract that says, Danielle, if you don't do this story next, I can cut your pinky off. That's not a legal contract. Right.
Now I understand that's an extreme case, but does this contract violate certain laws, standards, at least community standards, in terms of what you can prevent someone from doing justifiably in a contract?
Well, just from my experience in HR, human resources type jobs, it's illegal to fire somebody just because you find out they're pregnant. And it's,
sure.
You have to walk a very thin line if that person is deserving of being terminated and just happen to tell you that they're pregnant. You have to document it very well.
All kinds of questions that are out of bounds when you're applying.
Right.
When you're interviewing someone. Are you married? Blah, blah, blah. We watched this with the NFL having issues with this recently.
Right. Apparently, she is not the first teacher that has been fired for a similar offense, and many other cases have come before the courts. Some have ruled essentially that, the teacher signed a contract. Others were found in favor of the teacher, but specifically because there was evidence that the school didn't want to find a replacement during the maternity leave.
Oh, so morality was inconvenient.
Right. And there's another case that...
Now, what was it? Did they have the phrase from the contract?
They have it quoted as sexually immoral behavior, including premarital sex.
Oh, so it was specifically said.
Yes. It was a 2-page contract with San Diego Christian College that Terry James signed. She said she was humiliated after being pulled into her supervisor's office, asked if she was pregnant, and then terminated. The really insulting part is that they then offered the position to her now husband.
It's not only insulting; you're treating men differently than women. That inequality should be an issue that comes up in this case.
Right. Well, we're going to be talking about equality a lot today, so I thought this was particularly relevant.
Yeah, indeed.
Yes. And speaking of equality and protections for women, and I know most people may have heard about this, but it's big news that the Violence Against Women Act has finally passed the House this week. As of Thursday, the Senate version of the Violence Against Women Act went back to the House of Representatives and passed 286 to 138, all 138 votes being Republicans. They really didn't get anything from the last election, and that whole war on women tagline getting stuck with them, did they?
No.
No. They were originally objecting to provisions that included protection for same-sex women, undocumented immigrants, and Native Americans. Those were their objections, saying that the version was questionable in constitutionality. I don't understand how it's unconstitutional to provide protections to those women as well.
In fact, to not would have questions constitutionally to me.
I could see them saying, why doesn't the bill also protect men in domestic abuse situations? Although they are not as frequent, they do happen. Sure. I could live with that. And it could be I have no problem with it being Violence Against Everyone Act. Violence should never...
Anti-Domestic Violence Act.
Right. Domestic violence should never be acceptable. But to specifically say you don't like that same-sex couples, immigrants, and Native Americans are included in your list of protected classes or protected people seems a little discriminatory to me. Are you sensing a theme here with my news stories?
I'm sensing a theme with the Republican Party.
Oh, yes. Yes. Well, that's not hard to point out. House leaders agreed to allow a vote on the Democratic favored version after it passed the Senate weeks ago, 78 to 22.
In the interim, didn't they put forward their own version that kind of...
They put forward their own version that took these additional protections out of the bill.
And then public pressure.
Right. Which is what likely caused them to finally allow this vote.
So it works. That's a great story.
Exactly. Republican objections were still noted, but they varied in reasons, specifically constitutional concerns or procedural objections to how it was brought to the floor because it had gone through the Senate first, but that's because the House couldn't get anything done. But 19 House Republicans signed a letter to House Republican leadership saying, essentially, we need to vote on this. This is bad public image.
It's bad policy.
It's bad policy.
Why don't they just say it's bad policy? This is a good bill. We should be voting on it.
Because they don't care about that. They just care about whether or not they're going to get votes later. And I wish this was bigger news. Bradley Manning finally saw a day in court this week on his 1,005th day in prison without a trial.
Which they termed a speedy trial.
Right.
After he brought a motion to have it dismissed for lack of a speedy trial.
Right. Rules for court-martial require the military to arraign defendants within 120 days, and more than 600 days passed while Bradley was in prison before prosecutors brought the arraignment.
Isn't there another time constraint between arraignment and trial?
There could very well be. This is a summary article specifically that Judge Lind, Denise Lind, ruled that this didn't constitute a violation of his right to a speedy trial, and that she said that because of the complexity of the case and the voluminous set of documents at issue, she actually praised prosecutors for bringing the case so quickly. 1,000 days.
Well,
3 years.
I say we put the judge in confinement, pre-trial confinement, if they don't want to call it jail,
right,
for 1,000 days and see if that's speedy.
And much of this time he's spent in solitary confinement, and it is, been so hard on his mental capacity that he's been on suicide watch a lot of that time. This is just such an obvious civil rights violation.
Yeah, and I'm trying to see, right to a speedy trial in the Constitution. Is there an exception for if there's a lot of documents? I didn't catch that one.
I didn't see that line in there.
Unless the prosecutor's really busy that day, or
right. Unless they're really angry at him because maybe he shared some government secrets.
Yeah.
Yeah, in addition, prosecutors are trying to submit evidence showing that Osama bin Laden received documents out of those released to WikiLeaks by Bradley Manning. And the defense is arguing that, anybody could have gotten access to those documents and that they're specifically using Osama bin Laden to further, impugn Bradley's character. And at the same time, they're allowed to do that, or at least prosecutors are arguing that they're allowed to do so, while denying the defense the right to show that the WikiLeaks releases brought no actual harm to the United States. So they're not allowed to say this didn't cause any harm, but they're allowed to say Osama bin Laden got a hold of the documents.
But all of this is moot. And correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't he plead guilty?
He pled guilty to lesser charges.
Right. So the trial's over. There is no trial now.
No, they're still trying him on other charges.
On other?
Yes.
He didn't. His part of it. Wow, I missed that part.
It wasn't a plea deal. He pled guilty to lesser charges voluntarily in hopes that they would,
knock it off.
Right. But they're still.
So 20 years isn't enough for them?
No, that's not enough for him. They're still pursuing him for.
I missed that completely. Wow.
Yeah. So let's just all hope that there's some sanity in the courtroom and that Bradley Manning sees real justice. Obama had 17 pardons this week, released 17 people out of prison or guilty pleas with 17 pardons. I would have loved to see Bradley Manning and Don Siegelman.
No kidding.
Among that list. And some happy news, because we always like to, add a little happiness in there. A Boston fraternity has raised $16,000 for their brother's transgender reassignment surgery. Yes, this gives me goosebumps because it's awesome. After Donnie Collins, a 20-year-old, was denied coverage from his parents' insurance policy as well as his student health plan for gender reassignment surgery, and this is chest surgery, not probably what would be more complicated. The insurance companies ruled that it was considered plastic surgery and not health-related, and the procedure was to cost $8,100, but neither insurance company would cover it. Donnie was originally trying to raise the money by a chip-in account, and when his brothers found out about his cause and found out that his insurance company was denying him, they raised money. The original goal was only $2,000, but just since the February 9th YouTube video appeal, they've raised $16,000, and the extra proceeds after the surgery will be donated to the Jim Collins Foundation, which provides financial aid for gender reassignment surgery.
That's awesome.
Yeah. That dispels so many fraternity jokes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And this all goes back to, for a very long time, and it still exists, insurance companies denying coverage for things that have to do with mental well-being.
Right.
Whether it be illness or just health in general. And they don't want to, if they cannot make sure, if they can say this is not part of someone's mental well-being, which is part of the whole body, that is part of us.
Absolutely.
Obviously. Then they would see that it's not elective. This is not elective, and that's how they're denying it. And they need to knock it off.
Well, but we applaud that fraternity.
Indeed.
Absolutely. And we will put the link up to where you can donate if you want to chip in, because extra proceeds will be going to even more people like Collins who need our help. So good for them. We have got a big show in store for you today. Of course, all the news about the Voting Rights Act and so many civil rights issues of our time. David Schoen of the ACLU Alabama is helping in the fight to protect the Voting Rights Act against Shelby, Alabama's challenge. He'll be joining us later in the show, as well as Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio, our good friend, will be coming to talk about all the issues of the day with us. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Big show in store. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Brad Friedman, your friendly citizen investigative blogger, journalist, troublemaker, muckraker, and all-around swell fellow from BradBlog.com. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday from 3 to 4 p.m. 1 hour of troublemaking and muckraking ripped from the pages of BradBlog.com and sometimes from the dark recesses of my mind. We'll have investigative interviews with newsmakers, we'll call out the liars, frauds, and phonies, and we'll even give kudos to the good guys if we can find any. Stories you won't hear anywhere else. We'll report on politics, elections, election reform, mainstream corporate media failure, media reform, global warming denialism, and everything before, during, and after. Join me for the Bradcast every Wednesday, now a full hour, 3 to 4 p.m., right here on Pacifica Radio's KPFK and coast to coast and around the globe on kpfk.org.
You're listening to and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
It's a redefining of the issue of not just the fact that, oh, it's my fault, I need to go buy a Prius. I should get an electric car. No, it's my fault for not stopping car culture as a whole. We don't need cars. I should have far greater technology right now than the internal combustion engine. It's 100-year-old technology.
Where is my jetpack?
Exactly. But you get the point. The issue is far larger than just recycling or driving a hybrid. It's stopping the manufacturing of these systems, these industries. They need to stop. You know, we will never have national health care guaranteed as a right for all as long as we have insurance companies that make money off of us. So the insurance companies need to go away. We don't need insurance companies. We need health care. You know, it's the whole health insurance reform. What a lie that is, because we need health care reform. And the list goes on. So it's redefining the issue and redefining the argument.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Arty mateys, welcome to the ocean. I've sailed the seven seas 100 times and found something I like even more than me treasure. 'Tis the ocean, beautiful and clear. Right now I be sailing over the Great Barrier Reef. It just shivers me timbers thinking of all the fish and coral below me. Wait, what's that floating by? The plastic bag! By Blackbeard's eye patch, that's disgusting. Why did you know that many of these things come from folks throwing them carelessly on the ground? It be true. Lend us a hand by always recycling and disposing of your trash properly. Boys, get the plank ready. Somebody's got to dive in and get that bag. Any volunteers? Cannons. All right, fine. I'll do it myself. Cannonball! Find out what you can do to help keep the oceans healthy at keepoceansclean.org. Brought to you by the Keep Oceans Clean Alliance and the Ad Council.
Hey! Are you living in a progressive talk void? If so, be sure to visit leftwingradiostations.com. The state-by-state listing is a quick and easy way to find any left-wing talk radio station across America, from sea to shining sea. Your progressive talk nirvana is only a click away at leftwingradiostations.com. Be sure to like Left-Wing Radio Stations on Facebook and share it with your friends. leftwingradiostations.com. United we stand.
SoFloRadio.com remains on the air with free archives thanks to the support of our listeners. Help keep us on the air by clicking the donate button on SoFloRadio.com. And thank you for your generous support.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shana.
Yes, you are. Welcome back to Talking Left. Thank you wherever you're checking us out, radioornot.com, SoFlo Radio, Progressive Blend, or of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC in Washington, D.C. We're going to be talking a lot during this show about civil rights and voting rights and how it's all related.
And remember last year, my predictions for 2013?
Yes, let's hope you're not correct. Just a
reminder.
reminder.
Well, no, just that these issues were going to be coming up a lot. Now, that prediction's not that tough when you know what the Supreme Court docket looks like, kind of. But at that point, I don't think there were a couple things that have come up since then.
Yes.
But a lot of these things are going to be determined by our 9 kings and queens.
Yes.
Oh, joy.
And a lot of it has been talk about the loss of civil rights through FISA, through the Voting Rights Act, and many more of these cases and laws that have been discussed recently. One of the cases where civil rights could be expanded, which is really big news and it's very important, is if the Supreme Court overturns Prop 8 and the Defense of Marriage Act. And the push supporting the right of same-sex people to marry has just gotten stronger and stronger this week. 131 Republicans, legislators, attorneys, a various group of prominent Republicans, and 60
Perhaps
major...
not prominent anymore.
Yes.
You know what the Republican Party tends to do.
60 major corporations have submitted amicus briefs to the Supreme Court in support of gay marriage and support of equal rights. And historically, President Obama's administration has submitted one as well. He is the first president in U.S. history to come out in favor of same-sex marriage and has done so in
a legal document.
In a legal document, in a friend of the court brief that's been submitted for the Prop 8 case, California's Prop 8 case.
Now, the administration was already involved in the Defense of Marriage Act because that's a federal law.
Right.
So that we were already involved in that, and the president said, I will, enforce DOMA, but as a legal question, we do not believe it's constitutional. So they've been having to straddle that line.
Right.
But when it comes to Proposition 8, that's a California case. So the fact that the government is also they essentially filed an amicus brief.
Yes.
They're not a party to this case, but they do have an opinion on it. It's being argued at the end of this month. It's 2 different days. One is Prop 8, and one is going to be Defense of Marriage Act. But they are also putting forward not only a coherent position, but a very loud one. I'm glad they intervened on that one.
Absolutely. They said in the amicus brief, the administration said LGBT families establish homes and lives together, support each other financially, share the joys and burdens of raising children, and provide care through illness and comfort at the moment of death. Essentially saying that these are families in every respect, in every definition that people who are against gay marriage say their own families take place. These are the rights that every family should enjoy. And let's hope that the Supreme Court agrees. I know this was a quick segment.
5 of them at least.
Yes. I know this was a quick segment, but we want to make sure to stay on schedule so we don't get behind for David Schoen later in the show. He is the attorney helping to represent the ACLU and the NAACP in the Shelby County, Alabama versus Eric Holder Voting Rights Act case. So we're going to come right back and talk about Scalia's big racial remarks. It's just astounding. We'll be right back here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Don't go anywhere.
A beautiful place full of wonderful things just waiting to be experienced.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Get ready for the rapture. Not the religious kind, but a financial rapture being promised to us by the Holy Spirits of Silicon Valley. Actually, making a financial killing is the religion of the Valleyites, and top techies there are currently in a quasi-religious swoon over what they prophesize to be the next big thing for America. Ready for what they're offering as our economic salvation? Online gambling. Hallelujah! Multi-billions of dollars, they exult, will flow like manna from heaven as everyday gambling sweeps across the land through our iPads and even our cell phones. Gambling is to be as simple as buying an e-book, they brag. No need to go to a casino or anywhere for that matter. You'll have the convenience of placing bets right from the comfort of your own lazy boy while enjoying the whole experience with your, quote, virtual friends. Oh, nice. Virtual, as in not actual. Gosh, I hope you are as ecstatic about this as I am. Ecstatic or not, here it comes. with visions of new tax revenue flowing like a mighty river from the munificent gods of mass online wagering, Delaware, Nevada, and New Jersey are already tweaking their laws in a rush to bring this effervescent industry streaming into the lives of their residents. Meanwhile, top siliconers from Amazon, Apple, and Google are excitedly investing in the exuberance of this phenomena. Everybody, says the co-founder of MySpace, is really anticipating this becoming a huge business. The game maker Zynga has jumped out front with an ad promoting its first online betting game, urging everyone to, quote, live the dream. This is Jim Hightower saying, notice the proliferation of such fuzzy concepts as exuberance, anticipation, and dream? Is anything about this prophecy of a new industry real, or are they just conjuring up another speculative bubble?
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. Just days ahead of the $85 billion in automatic federal spending cuts that begin to kick in, labor unions, progressives, and Democrats are arguing for a more intelligent, targeted effort to balance revenues and government spending. One of the first groups of people to really feel the sequester pain will be long-term unemployed workers, who will take a hit to their already inadequate unemployment checks. The biggest ripple effect will come from furloughed federal workers. As the Friday sequester deadline looms, Simpson-Bowles has once again come up with a budget-cutting plan that they are trying to spin as balanced. But the plan that Erskine Bowles and former Senator Alan Simpson are advocating is a plan that, according to the AFL-CIO, tells working people to drop dead. AFL-CIO President Rich Trumka says the commission that these two headed in 2010 pushed a budget blueprint that cut tax rates for corporations and the richest Americans while cutting Social Security benefits, shifting Medicare costs to individuals, taxed health insurance benefits, and cut federal worker pay benefits and jobs. The updated Simpson-Bowles plan, Trumka says, once again proposes cutting taxes for corporations and the rich and pays for it by cutting Social Security cost of living increases, taxing health benefits, and cutting federal employee health and retirement benefits. The AFL-CIO says for working people and our nation, the latest Simpson-Bowles plan is dead on arrival. Latino organizations have joined a global boycott against one of the world's largest hotel chains. Jesse Russell reports.
A boycott against Hyatt hotels expanded this week with 3 major Hispanic civil rights groups pledging their support. The National Council of La Raza, the Mexican American Legal Defense and Education Fund, and the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement have all pledged to not hold conventions or other special events at Hyatt hotels that are being targeted by the boycott. The boycott is being led by Unite Here over allegations by workers of mistreatment, intimidation, and unsafe working conditions. The union claims that the global boycott, which was launched in July of 2012, has cost the company more than $27 million in lost business. Unite Here is asking the chain to adopt recommendations made by the U.S. government that would reduce the daily strain on housekeepers, to allow non-union Hyatt hotels to organize, and to sign off on a contract for thousands of workers, many of whom have been working without a contract for 3 years. Other organizations that have already pledged support for the boycott include the NFL Players Association, the National Organization of Women, Interfaith Worker Justice, and others.
This newscast made possible in part through underwriting support from the IBEW. To keep labor news on the air, join the Solidarity Circle at laborradio.org. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It takes 12 years to create a graduate. It takes about the same time to create a dropout. And at the end of the day, the difference between a child becoming one or the other could be you. So United Way is asking you to make a pledge. Tutor a child who needs help. Mentor a kid who needs someone on their side. Volunteer to read to children. Because when a child advances, we all advance. Be a reader, tutor, or mentor. Give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Take the pledge now at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
Vote for me, vote for me. If I am elected
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're listening. And remember to download the podcast for free on iTunes. We've also started taking all the commercials out of it to make it faster to download and easier to listen to.
Because I know that, I try to go through and listen to it, make sure it's okay. It's kind of a pain in the butt, especially on the phones, to scroll through, But make sure when you're listening, you support the sponsors and things like that, too, so we can do this.
Absolutely.
Especially We Act and SoFlo Radio and
RadioNot.com.
The other shows. Just because we're taking them out for the podcast, you still should be here listening to them.
Yes.
Eat your spinach.
Yes. So the words that caused audible gasps in the Supreme Court this week. Antonin Scalia's completely racist statement that the Voting Rights Act was a, quote, perpetuation of racial entitlement. I don't think it gets more offensive than that for me personally. And I feel like that statement alone shows why we need the Voting Rights Act. But he referenced, I have the actual transcript here. He references the perpetuation of racial entitlement and says, quote, "It's been written about. Whenever a society adopts racial entitlements, it's very difficult to get out of them through the normal political processes. It's been written about." Well, Shane, you did a little research to figure out where that horrendous phrase was written about. And what'd you find?
That it was written about by a very famous writer, author. He thinks he's a great legal thinker. Oh, Antonin Scalia was the one who wrote about it.
So he referenced his own writing.
Yes. It's been picked up other places since, but I was trying to go back and find the earliest. The earliest I could find was 1979. And he wrote about it in an article, "Disease as Cure. In order to get beyond racism, we must first take account of race." That's the name of it. And what he's arguing,
okay,
just to put forward, I'm not going to say as eloquently or as belligerently as he may, if he were here, he's arguing that these racial entitlements are racist in and of themselves. He writes, when he wrote about this was about affirmative action in school admittance. He says the affirmative action system now in place will produce the latter result. I should look, because it is based upon concepts of racial indebtedness and racial entitlement rather than individual worth and individual need. That is to say, because it is racist. Meaning that affirmative action itself, by treating people differently, is racist. And he's also applying this then by treating black voters in the South differently, it's racist on its face, which is ridiculous, I believe.
Absolutely. I mean, especially if we consider the attack that voting rights went under in the past 2 years.
Well, we should actually start at the beginning.
Okay.
We fought a war over slavery.
Yeah.
Everyone knows about it. It's called the Civil War, crazy little thing in the 1880s. And we came from that. We had 2 amendments to our Constitution to provide for equality for people of color. You cannot discriminate on the basis of race or previous status of servitude if you were a slave. 14th, equal protection. Then there was the 15th, which is you can't discriminate in the vote on the basis of race, color, or previous servitude. And the second sentence of it says Congress may enact laws to make this happen. So in other words, the people put in an amendment saying this is what we want to get done. Congress, you get it done. Like a CEO, make it happen.
And in response, Congress
for
passed.
For 100 years, the response was we're just going to figure out different ways to discriminate.
Yes, like literacy tests. All of the Jim Crow
laws. So the franchise,
of the
while
South.
granted in an amendment, wasn't granted in practice, especially in the South, the old Confederate states. So around the time that we were dealing with civil rights in this country, passing the Civil Rights Law of 1964, in 1965, said, well, we should get to this voting thing. And so a law was passed by Congress after going through an extensive record.
Right.
Which put all these things in. And then it's been reauthorized a number of times.
They came up with a formula, basically, to figure out what percentage of the population was discriminated against based on race. They, in the simplest terms.
Yeah, there are all kinds of different remedies. Section 2, you've heard a lot of, I'm sure everyone's heard a lot about this week, covers all the states where you can go in and you can sue if you think a voting law is discriminatory. There's a process to do that. 5 is the one that was at issue.
The pre-clearance requirement.
Right, which says, we've used this formula and we've figured out based on historical statistics, what's gone on, the laws you've had, the laws that have been overturned, your actions over the years. Unfortunately, you guys are the real culprits in terms of blocking people of color, African Americans from voting. So not only can people sue you for putting in these laws, before you put them in, we want to take a look over your shoulder and make sure you're not doing it. So you have to run those by us and we'll say yes or no. And then you can litigate if you don't agree with us.
Right. And states and counties also have the option of opting out. They call it bailing out.
If you, in other words, based on good behavior,
right? If they can show 10 years of non-discriminatory laws,
stop being a racist PIA, then you're out of this,
right?
But instead, we've had it for what now? Was it almost 50 years? And they're still saying we should overturn it. Well, why don't you just stop passing racist voting laws and you don't have to worry about this anymore?
Right.
Instead, you have what's Justice Sotomayor called the epitome of why we have this act, Shelby County. And we're going to be hearing from somebody who knows a lot more about Shelby County than you and I coming up at the top of the hour. You're the reason we have this law, and you're coming in here and complaining about it because you're getting picked on? Are you kidding me?
Right.
And then you have Scalia saying, well, this whole thing is ridiculous.
Just in 2011, leading up to the 2012 election, 15 states, including Alabama, passed restrictive voting laws or attempted to pass restrictive voting laws. For instance, Alabama passed a photo ID law, essentially requiring people to show a higher level of identification in order to vote, which has been proven to discriminate against the poor, against the African American community, against students, and against the elderly, people who don't typically have a driver's license. And they've also passed, Alabama included, passed a proof of citizenship law that in order to vote or register to vote, you needed a birth certificate or Social Security information proving you were born in this country or that you had since become a citizen. Now, it's pretty typical for that information to be checked. Most people who are not citizens do not try and apply for the right to vote. It's such a small percentage of people that this vote is essentially just targeted to people who, maybe you don't have a ready copy of your birth certificate.
We can sit here and debate all day long whether a rule is, or a voting law is or is not, have a disparate impact. It treats people differently based on the race, on their race. The courts have ruled on this, and there are statistics to prove it, that the covered states, the states that are still have to pre-clear under this 5, when those cases are brought, they're 4 times more likely. There's 4 times as many cases throwing out their laws than the other states. So the formula must be working.
Right. And
we have evidence that you're still trying to do it.
And one of the things we keep hearing is that Congress passed the 2006, renewal of this law without any objection, and that they didn't even look at it. They just passed it. But that's entirely not correct. They looked through hours of testimony,
46 witnesses just in the House, 12,000 pages of documents. They had testimony. They looked at this. They actually made some changes as well.
Right. But
by the way, it passed 98-0 in the Senate, which means Alabama senators.
And according to Scalia, that's what indicates a problem. That if there had been dissent, it would be fine. And funny enough, he quotes, let's see if I can find it here. Oh, goodness. That the Israeli Supreme Court used to have a rule that if the death penalty was pronounced unanimously, it was invalid because there must be something wrong there. He's actually arguing the fact that reauthorization passed 98-0 is a problem, that the unopposed vote actually undermines the law.
He's referencing Israeli law?
Yeah.
What's next? He's going to be going after, he's going to be citing Sharia law?
I think he's going to be jumping on the Agenda 21 UN bandwagon.
There you go.
Yeah, but it's pretty odd that a Supreme Court justice of the United States is referencing Israeli Supreme Court law to justify his racism. I don't understand how that's even relevant.
What he's really saying is that Congress doesn't have the cojones, so to speak, to.
That's exactly what he's saying.
He's saying because it would be politically they don't have the political will to do it, so therefore we, the court, the kings, must do it. And the thing is that actually that may be the case, but if it's so darn popular, who are you to say? And on top of it, it's in an amendment to the Constitution, and on top of it, the way the rule is set up, if it's not necessary, politically it can't keep rolling along because the states, if they really don't like it, use the bailout provision, behave, and you'll be out from under it, and this thing will go away by operation over time. Obviously it's not, the problem has not gone away. As Justice Breyer said, the disease still exists. And despite what Shelby, Alabama says, the problem is solved, it is not. Period. We have the evidence of that. And for the court to substitute its discretion over that of Congress when the Constitution itself gives it to Congress is a bunch of bull.
It absolutely is. Scalia's comments suggest that the bill continues to pass, especially with unanimous support, quote, because of a growing national consensus, not because of a growing national consensus that racial disenfranchisement is unacceptable, but because lawmakers are too afraid to be tarred as racists. Well, wouldn't that in and of itself indicate that people feel changing the Voting Rights Act is racist? Just saying. We're going to get into this a lot more, and we're really looking forward to speaking with Daniel Schoen of the ACLU. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left. We'll be right back.
Whoa! Awesome! Totally awesome! All right!
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
No plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending. We got no plans.
This is your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. I love apathetic people. I really do. People are so hard on lazy, apathetic people. Even I have been at times, but I've seen the error of my ways. I love apathetic people because society needs people, needs warm bodies to churn through its gears and all over. A certain percentage have to be all over, right? That's what we're taught. That's how it works. There are winners and there are losers. And everything is going to suck for the losers. And I don't want losers who are trying hard and care about everything. That makes me feel bad to see someone's life suck when they don't want it to suck. So instead, we should just use the apathetic people. They don't care what's going on. They're proud of it. You try to bring up an issue of any depth or any significance, and they go, man, I don't even care. I don't give a I don't give a I don't give a third thing that's vulgar. In a recent survey, 42% of America said they're even slightly invested in what's happening around the world. 5% said they're not concerned at all. And a full 53% of people didn't care enough to even answer the survey. And I made up those numbers, but they still piss me off. So let's put it in the law. If you don't care what the is going on, then you're one of the people that should get on. I would love that. I'm tired of caring because the truth is, I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted. I don't want to be yelling. I want to be sitting at home on a couch in a snuggie watching a Discovery Channel video of an antelope just hopping, just hopping, just, with little baby antelopes just following after, just antelopes just hopping, but I can't. I have to tour the country screaming about all the poor people getting on. But if the people getting on were the apathetic people, I'd be able to take a break. We all would. Picture it. Someone who cared would walk up to you and be like, oh, it's horrible. The bottom 40% of the country don't even live in houses. They live inside jungle gyms where they have to fend off kids who just want to play. And then I'd be like, but wait, those people living in the jungle gyms, they're all apathy mongers, right? Apathetites, right? So f*** them. Why should we care about them when they don't even care about them? It's not like they're going to say anything. It's not like they're going to march against it. What do we want? Don't give a when do we want it? You tell us. So every time you meet someone who's apathetic, you give them a hug. You give them a hug and you say, thank you. You are one less person I have to care about. And that's been your moment of clarity from LeeCamp.net. I have live shows coming up in Boston, Baltimore, and Vermont. Go for details to LeeCamp.net/schedule. Also, if you haven't watched the Moment of Clarity show, episode 1 of the show, you're missing out something fierce. So go to LeeCamp.net or my YouTube channel, scroll down, you'll be able to tell which episode is the show, and it's fucking great. So go there. Thanks a lot. Keep fighting.
No plans at all. Evil man's always transcending. Fighter like sheep, swallow everything. Always simpletons or pretending.
More than you want. Stand and be counted. Stand on the truth. Stand on your honor.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. So we're talking about civil rights and Scalia's historically racist, offensive comment of perpetuation of racial entitlement. So in doing a little research, perhaps Scalia meant, entitled like minorities being entitled to stand in line for 7 hours to vote. Entitled to an unemployment rate that's twice as high as white people, or entitled to a income disparity that has tripled in 25 years. But, I don't know why any of us should be surprised by this. Shane, you were doing a little research, and this is no big surprise from Scalia, right?
It surprised me.
It still surprised you.
It's still, because I'm sorry, I haven't read everything he's ever written. But there's a case from 1995. In fact, this case was cited in many of the briefs. It was Adirond Constructors versus Pena. Had to do with awarding federal contracts to economically disadvantaged businesses, and somebody sued over this. So it was, in other words, of trying to get equality in terms of people who've been disadvantaged business-wise in awarding those contracts. And he wrote, in a decision, now he didn't say it out loud in the court, but this is in his concurring decision, to pursue the concept of, here it is, racial entitlement, even for the most admirable and benign of purposes, is to reinforce and preserve the future mischief, the way of thinking that produced race slavery, race privilege, and race hatred. In the eyes of the government, we are just one race here. It is American.
But those statistics that we were just talking about show that that's not correct. And this study,
maybe in an ideal world, but that's not where we are.
This study that shows the wealth disparity, the income gap between whites and people of color, says, this is a very in-depth research study by the Institute on Assets and Social Policies at Brandeis University. And they went through the reasons, because so many people want to talk about that it's behavioral based, or that, that they want to have their coded way of saying black people are just lazy. That's really what they want to say. And it's offensive not only on its face, and it's inappropriate, but it's factually inaccurate. And I mean, we can all say that. We've known it. We recognize that's a ridiculous statement. But Brandeis University actually produced evidence as such, saying the configuration of both opportunities and barriers in workplaces, schools, and communities that reinforce deeply entrenched racial dynamics is how wealth has accumulated in the white community, and it continues to permeate the most important spheres of everyday life. They're saying that these are institutional policies, that this doesn't have anything to do with behavior or work ethic or what any racist person believes. This is society, and it shows we still have a long way to go to catch up.
And we need bills and laws like the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So that to try to get rid of this institutional racism.
Exactly.
Because
we certainly shouldn't be eliminating
take down these
it.
protections is to only let it keep going and flourish.
Yeah, we shouldn't be eliminating it. We should be strengthening it. That and every other civil rights historic laws in our nation's history. We're going to be coming back with David Schoen. He is fighting for the Voting Rights Act in Alabama, and he'll be speaking with us next. Don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left. We'll be right back.
I'm David Schuster of Take Action News, and you're listening to my favorite show other than my own, Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
It's Tuesday, February 26, 2013.
Punishing blizzard is hitting the country hard, right through the heartland.
Here we go again, another historic storm.
This is the 33rd consecutive week that we've been over 50% of the country in drought conditions.
But it's not enough to end our historic drought. BP finally goes to trial for the oil disaster in the Gulf. China and Estonia move forward on renewable energy innovation. Plus,
we know we're playing Russian roulette with our climate. I believe you have to take action.
California Governor Jerry Brown says fighting climate change is a boon, not a bust, for the economy.
All of those boons and busts straight ahead from bradblog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Dealing with climate change can be a big stimulus.
I know I'm stimulated. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, yet another huge storm marching through the Midwest.
Yes, I know. We'll talk about that in just a moment.
And how bad is our current drought across the country if all of these storms that we've been seeing over the past 6 months have not taken care of the drought?
I know. We'll get to that in a moment, too.
I'm just chomping at the bit.
I know. But first, greed devastated the Gulf. That was the prosecution's opening argument in the federal civil trial of oil giant BP that began in New Orleans, Louisiana on Monday to determine civil charges and fines for the worst offshore oil spill in the nation's history in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. The first witness who consulted with BP on risk management testified that BP's corporate culture prioritized cost-cutting over safety. BP faces maximum civil fines of up to $17 billion if they are found to have acted with gross negligence in violating the Clean Water Act. BP is reportedly said to be pushing for a settlement that designates damages as penalties for environmental damage rather than fines for violating the Clean Water Act, because penalties are tax deductible and fines are not. 2
points come to mind here. One, I'm frankly amazed that they made it into court, that they didn't strike a settlement before getting there, and so that's good. Two, it should be said, this is the civil trial. On the criminal charges, BP pled guilty to 11 counts of manslaughter, and yet nobody went to jail.
That's correct. It's the second major snowstorm in a week that's now pummeling the Midwest.
20 states now, from the Lone Star State all the way up to Michigan, with storm watches and warnings this evening.
It's the latest in a string of record storms in the eastern half of the U.S. in just the last 6 months. The National Weather Service called this week's blizzard, quote, truly historic. Wichita, Kansas, for example, broke its 100-year-old February snowfall record in just 6 days. Unfortunately, the string of major snowstorms is still not enough to end the historic drought gripping the Midwest. Federal officials are now projecting that large parts of the country will face water shortages this summer. Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack briefed the annual meeting of the National Governors Association on Monday on 2 new USDA studies, bluntly warning them that more long-term economic losses are ahead for the agriculture industry due to extreme weather events.
The world around us is indeed getting warmer. And the result of that will be more intense weather patterns and circumstances, longer droughts, more flooding, more severe storms, which will have an adverse impact on crop production and livestock. and it will likely lead to increased tree mortality, which in turn increases the risk of wildfire.
Another similar warning that I'm sure the governors can't wait to ignore back in their home states.
They're not all ignoring it. California Governor Jerry Brown, also speaking at the National Governors Meeting, focused on the economic stimulus benefits of addressing climate change and urged his fellow governors to work with California to take action.
In California, we've adopted a goal of 33% renewable energy for our electricity. We have the toughest efficiency standards that started 30 years ago. We have a cap-and-trade system, but we can't do it alone. We need other states. America can't do it alone. We need China. We need India. But it's not a cause of some kind of hair shirt or burden. It's a real stimulus for innovation.
Finally, other countries are moving forward. China's chief environment minister publicly announced last week that China plans to institute a carbon tax on carbon dioxide emissions, a tax on coal, and a pollution discharge tax for manufacturers. Estonia is also innovating. The small northern European country has become the first country in the world to install a nationwide network of fast chargers for electric cars.
It's great seeing China and Estonia kicking our rear ends when it comes to dealing with climate change and moving towards renewable energy. I'm very proud. For more on all of these stories, please check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider making a donation to help us stay on your public airwaves. And don't forget, you can download us anytime via iTunes, listen to us on your mobile device via Stitcher or TuneIn Radio apps. Find us and like us on the Facebook and follow us 24/7 on the Twitters at Green News Report. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. 'Cause there ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Joining us now is somebody we are extremely honored to speak with, and that is David Schoen. He is the counsel for ACLU Alabama, and he is the gentleman the American Bar Association has stated has done more to change the face of public institutions through his litigation in the South than any other attorney in his generation. David, that is quite an intro, and we are really honored to speak with you.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor for me to be on the show and to be able to speak to your listeners about these important issues.
Absolutely. We've been covering the Voting Rights Act since it was announced that the court was going to hear the challenge. But you've been working on it for longer than that. Could you explain how this case came about and how it managed to get before the Supreme Court?
Sure. There are a number of cases actually trying to challenge the constitutionality of the Voting Rights Act, and this is the first one that got to the court. Let me just back up 1 second.
Absolutely.
Talk a little bit about, I'm sure your readers know, your listeners know all about this, and I'm sure you've covered it, but I'll talk a little bit about Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act that we're talking about. And this, of course, as your listeners know, was a critically important piece of a law that Congress passed because of the undeniable record of systemic discrimination against minorities, particularly African-American minorities, but later expanded to non-English language speaking minorities. One of the most important pieces of legislation ever passed in this country. And why? The reason's clear. It's because the right to vote in this country, at least, is our greatest safeguard to preserving all of our other constitutional rights. And if the listeners think about it, that would be clear to them if they haven't already recognized it. Who you put into office and whether you have an opportunity to put the candidate of your choice into office is the key to exercising and to getting all of the other rights that the Constitution guarantees, and that somehow lawmakers often feel the temptation to curtail or to cut off
right.
Against minority interests. And so by exercising the right to vote and having the ability to exercise the right to vote, particularly minority voters have that chance to have their voice heard. And look, the history of discriminatory practices is undeniable. And quite frankly, despite all of the progress we've made, and everyone acknowledges great progress,
of course,
the practices still go on today. And that's the important point. But I have to tell you, what's so important to me about a show like this is that, you know, we've used this issue now to engage so many people in this discussion that otherwise really didn't know what the Voting Rights was all about, or Voting Rights Act was all about.
Right.
They may have known the history anecdotally, but it's so important for everyone to get engaged to make sure to preserve these rights. And it's in real trouble now before the court.
Yes. I think especially in northern states or states not covered under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, many people are not familiar with it and don't realize the necessity of this legislation, you know, in 2013. But we saw in this last election, you know, 9 hours to wait in line in Florida. We saw ID laws put forth and passed in various states. You know, the essential challenge to the most fundamental right in our democratic process. And it shows how clearly we still need this. Yet, according to Shelby, Alabama, you know, we have a black president and the situation is fixed and they should no longer be required to get the pre-clearance from the Justice Department. How did you get involved in such a historic case?
Right. Well, yeah. So to go back to your original question, how did Shelby County?
Yes,
get here?
even better.
You said it exactly right. I mean, Shelby County took the position that, after all, what is it that you folks want? You've got an African American president. You've got African American legislators in Alabama and in other states. Come on, we've progressed so far now. Discrimination's not a problem anymore. I think, again, you know, anecdotal or stories people tell on the street are only so useful. But I would assure you that if you speak to the average African-American voter in Alabama and in other covered jurisdictions, they would tell you that little could be further from the truth. They would acknowledge that great progress has been made. But you know, one of the main reason in Alabama, and courts have found this, that progress has been made is because of Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act.
Right.
So it's a circular argument. There's a fellow in Alabama named Jerome Gray, for example, who has been an activist for, 30 years, 35 years, on behalf of African-American rights, but voter rights more generally. And some of the reasons that we've been able to bring challenges in Alabama to tactics that the legislature has tried to use, and that happens in other cases, is because a guy like Jerome Gray has his ear to the ground, and he alerts the ACLU or other organizations to propose changes so that we can step in and act. As for how I got involved, you know, I'm just honored to have been asked by the ACLU to represent them, and I only got involved once the case got to the Supreme Court stage. But there are some of the finest Voting Rights Act lawyers in this case, starting with a fellow Lachlan McDonald, who is the ACLU's voting rights expert, some of the finest lawyers in the country with these issues. So we're very lucky to have them involved. You know, we represent, on behalf of the ACLU, a group that's called the interveners in this case. So what happened is Shelby County sued over their inclusion. They argued that the Voting Rights Act, Section 5 in particular, is not constitutional anymore, basically claiming that a number of things, but that Congress was relying on old evidence. You know, what happened is this act was passed originally in 65, and then in 1975, it was expanded to include non-English language minorities so that it increased the coverage, but it also made it easier for jurisdictions to get out from under the coverage. And
with the bailout, quote-unquote bailout provision showing 10 years of non-discriminatory practices. Why didn't Shelby County just opt for the bailout?
Exactly, and that's, I think, unfortunately, that's not getting nearly enough coverage. So the listeners should all know that there's a very specific bailout procedure in this act. And as you just said, if a jurisdiction that's covered, originally, by the way, the way it read was, if a jurisdiction was covered, they had to prove that they shouldn't have been covered in the first place. But Congress said, no, we're going to make it easier for you to show that you don't discriminate anymore. So in 1975, they expanded the bailout process and said, as you just said, that if you can prove that you comply with this specific criteria, non-discriminatory criteria, for the previous 10 years, you're out. And I mean, I can give you, I don't need to go into the details here, but we have a list of those jurisdictions that have bailed out. There have been 136 jurisdictions that have bailed out from under the Act since 86. I mean, I can give you the dates of all of the bailouts. So that part of the Act is also working. That's as of the statistic I just gave you is as of May 9th, 2012. There have been 136 jurisdictions that bailed out. On the other hand, to those who say this is all a matter of ancient history at this point, we're not in the 60s or 70s anymore, I'll give you one other quick statistic. Since 1982, there have been 2,400 discriminatory changes blocked by the courts in over 750 objections under Section 5, which means if it hadn't been for Section 5, those are 2,400 different discriminatory changes in districting or in other actions that affect voting. Now, you mentioned, photo ID laws and that sort of thing, and these long lines. Well, you're exactly right. I mean, those are some of the best current examples going on. In 2011, I mean, the other day, South Carolina enacted a new photo ID requirement for in-person voting, and the Justice Department objected, and a court said that it inappropriately discriminates against minority voters. Same thing in Florida in 2011. 2012, there's a case coming up through the pipe still. So, we're not kidding anyone here when we say, discrimination is over, we don't have a need for it. It's only limited by the cleverness of legislators who would like to advocate a particular political agenda. To be, perfectly blunt about it. But, again, I don't want to underemphasize the bailout procedures because it's similar to another aspect of this that people are forgetting. It's not as if someone just by caveat says, hey, listen, what's going on in the South is bad, and therefore, we're not going to accept anything they do. It just sets up a process for review by a court. It's not every change that the Justice Department objects to, but changes that they can identify. Believe me, they're busy people. But if they identify something on behalf of the American people, our voters, that they believe is discriminatory and it's going to deny someone the right to exercise this all-important right to vote, then they step in, but they don't get to, do away with it. There's a right to challenge it before a court. And, there are many conservative judges in the United States District Court for the District of Columbia today. That's where these judicial challenges go. And so it's not so easy to win the cases. We've got to prove that there's a discriminatory practice there.
Absolutely.
And if that's the case, then who should say that discriminatory practice ought to be permitted to go forward? Now, I'm sorry to talk so much, but I just want to...
It's quite all right. It's an honor to hear from you.
I'll tell you, just one other thing to consider is the alternative to this. If, many of the pundits are predicting that the court is going to do something to Section 5 after these arguments, and that is it might send it back to Congress and say, reconsider the evidence. Consider this. Congress passed, in 2006, Congress reauthorized the Voting Rights Act with the following vote. In the Senate, 98 to nothing. They said it has to be reauthorized. In the House, 390 to 33. Why? Well, they took evidence for months and months on two questions. Do ongoing problems with voting rights legislation justify continuing the coverage of Section 5? And are the most egregious, the worst violations, still largely concentrated in the covered jurisdictions? Congress overwhelmingly answered yes to both of those questions in reauthorizing it for another 25 years. Now, find another piece of legislation that passed this unbelievably divided and contentious Senate by a vote of 98 to nothing.
Right.
It's a basic fairness issue that every senator could see. So we talk all the time from the court about deference to Congress and, the court shouldn't be too activist. Well, where is that theory in this setting? If that theory were to apply, this would be a no-brainer. We would say, of course, Section 5 has to be constitutional and should have been reauthorized as it was. last thing I want to say is, in considering the framework for the challenge, what they're saying here is that, first of all, we all know there's a constitutional amendment. The 15th Amendment, 14th and the 15th Amendment are those that so preciously safeguard due process and the right to vote for minorities. I mean, remember, this Constitution wasn't written with the right to vote for minorities in mind at all. In fact, of course, as we all know, it denied that very basic right. So the 15th Amendment came in, and it's true, as Shelby County and others of their ilk argue, well, what about states' rights? The Constitution also provides for states to have certain rights that the federal government doesn't infringe on, and that is true, and it's a very important principle in many, many areas of the law. But with respect to the right to vote, we have to have uniform protection across the country, which can't be subject to the vagaries of legislators in various jurisdictions. Listen, I love the state of Alabama. I chose to come there in 1984. There's tremendous progress that's been made there. There are wonderful institutions in the state. And I believe that most legislators would not like to pass discriminatory voting legislation that affects voters' rights. But we've got to be vigilant to protect it at all times. I have to tell you that aside from the Voting Rights Act litigation, I do litigation, what's called ballot access litigation. And what we find there in Alabama, I've brought two cases, but this is not just Alabama, many states, the powers that be, the Democratic and Republican parties, have put into place legislation that makes it very, very difficult for small party or independent candidates to even get on the ballot.
Right.
So we bring those challenges on behalf of those parties and independent candidates and on behalf of the voters, because it's so important for the voters to get their choice of candidates in there. And in both cases that I brought, Alabama statute was struck down as unconstitutional, and it's been opened up a little bit. But we always have to be vigilant for these things, because you can be sure that those with the power take most of the time take steps to ensure that they maintain that power.
Absolutely. We are speaking with David Schoen, counsel for the ACLU of Alabama. We just have a minute or so left here, David, but let's hope that the Supreme Court makes the right decision on this. But in the event that they don't, people are saying that the only way to challenge these laws will be after an election to show that discrimination has taken place. Do you have any alternative of how people can get involved, before 2014, before 2016, to protect their right to vote and the rights of everybody in the areas they live?
Yeah, you've asked the key and most important question. As you say, we might be left with case-by-case challenges after the fact, and the problem with those is, as you well know, they're far too expensive for the individual voter to be able to bring. They're far too time-consuming. The candidate who gets in from discriminatory redistricting or other practice will be in office, will be passing laws that could have negative effect on minorities and that sort of thing. So the question is, what else can you do? Again, people have got, I think people should assume today that Section 5 may be altered by this decision, and so they've got to be on the lookout for things that sound neutral, like photo ID laws.
Right.
So that's the flavor of the day. But why are they not discriminatory? Because all of the statistics show, for example, in these states I've mentioned, 130,000 voters, prospective voters, don't have driver's licenses, photo IDs, principally because they can't afford to drive a car, and therefore they don't need to pay the fee to get official government photo ID. But they have the same right to vote, and it can't be dependent on whether they can afford to get that kind of photo ID. I'm not sort of making this stuff up or, selling you a piece. These are what the courts have found.
Absolutely.
And I can, point you to the cases and the dates and all of that. So be vigilant for those kinds of things that say, hey, listen, all we want you to do is show your ID at the post. Okay, well, before, all they wanted you to do was prove you could speak English well enough. And they'd come up with tests that were very difficult, far more difficult than would be necessary to, enter your vote for the candidate of your choice. But those at the time sounded to many people who sold them like they were, facially neutral. After all, what could be wrong with requiring someone to speak English at a certain level? It's how they implement those tests. So be vigilant for those things. Let your legislators, the state legislators, know how key the right to vote is, and that if they're not with you on expanding rather than contracting that vote, then they're going to lose your vote, and you will make sure to vote.
Absolutely. And make sure that those around you know why that vote has changed. Right. David, thank you so much for joining us. And please, if you're ever in Washington, D.C., we would love to bring you in the studio and thank you for the fine, important work that you do.
Thank you, but I've got to tell you, the work that you're doing is the most important, because getting this message out, getting people engaged in this discussion, thinking about it, talking about it, and then, as you say, acting on it, could not be more important. That's what this whole democratic process is about. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. With people like you inspiring us, the work will get done. Thank you, David. Have a wonderful Sunday.
You too. Take care.
Bye-bye.
I could listen to him all day.
Yes, David Schoen. I am fired up. I know we're running late, but how do you stop a power like that?
I know. I wish we would have had Alito, Scalia, and Thomas right in here to listen to that. Like,
I'm
change
in.
it right on a dime.
Yeah,
I wanted to point something out really quick before we go to break, because
Sure.
I wanted to find this in the. David was talking about how effective this act has been through the years. This is Justice Alito, who likely will vote to overturn this Section 5. He said, this is a quote from Alito from this transcript on Wednesday. "There is no question that the Voting Rights Act has done enormous good. It's one of the most successful statutes that Congress passed in the 20th century, and one could probably go farther than that."
Wow.
I hope that they remember this as they're deliberating.
I just wish
every word he said in that sentence was absolutely true.
Absolutely.
And that's why people like David are fighting so hard, and we appreciate it.
Lots more in store for today's show. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano, and we'll be right back after this break.
Everyone expected just a piece of fluff, but we wanted to do something important. You know, issue stuff.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child, and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at BigBrothersBigSisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/cancer answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but but I like talking to smart people. People who are smarter than me. Some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Jane Cougar of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 AM. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you're checking us out. RadioOrNot.com, SoFlo Radio, Progressive Blend, or of course, We Act Radio 1480 AM WPWC in Washington, D.C. Many thanks to our last guest, David Schoen. He was awesome, and hopefully we'll get the chance to speak to him again soon.
Yeah, we'll put that up as a separate clip.
Yeah.
That I've heard a lot of people talk about. I've done a lot of talking about it the last week, and heard the justice talk about it this week, and the attorneys talk about it. Most concise, most compelling, inspirational message, and I understand it more now than before, and I've been immersed in it. So
right.
He really, great spokesperson for this.
Absolutely. And, you know, we've been talking about civil rights a lot, and one of them that I think most of us consider quite important is your right to privacy. Fourth Amendment.
Yeah. Well, there are those who argue there is no right to privacy in the Constitution.
But
you are
okay.
correct. There are conservatives that say there's no right. It's been written into the Third and the Fourth Amendments. But yeah.
Well,
you're certainly no one's going to dispute that you have a right against unreasonable search or seizure.
And good luck trying to get that in a courtroom
if you can't prove you've been searched or seized.
Right. If that comes under a FISA case. The Supreme Court ruled Tuesday, blocked, essentially, a lawsuit challenging the federal government's right to spy on its citizens, not addressing the constitutionality of whether or not that's okay, but simply saying that in order to bring that lawsuit, you first have to prove that they were spying on you, which the federal government will never tell you. Catch-22 much?
Big time.
So what does somebody do in a case like this, Shane?
I think it's essentially written this way on purpose. You know, clandestine, wiretapping, they don't want it to be reviewed. They don't want a court overlooking this. And that's essentially what this case has said. When it comes to foreign surveillance under this, there will be no review by a court other than a secret court that no one knows about, no one can really go in front of. You can never see the documents from. You can't prove your wiretaps. You don't have standing.
Right. In a 5-4 decision, the conservative majority concluded that the plaintiffs, which was Amnesty International, media groups, human rights organizations, journalists, a whole variety of issues, the conservative majority said they lacked standing. They had no jurisdiction to proceed with the case. Samuel Alito said, quote, plaintiffs cannot demonstrate that the future injury they purportedly fear is certainly impending. Basically, you can't prove that the government's going to spy on you, let alone whether or not they have spied on you. And this all stems from the 2008 reauthorization of FISA, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, in which Congress gave the Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence authority to order, quote, mass acquisition of electronic traffic from suspected foreign terrorists or spies. So if the government considers you or the person that you're talking to a suspected spy or terrorist, which is a pretty loose definition, as we've seen with the Gitmo cases and who's been prosecuted, you could be subject to a wireless tap. And unless you can prove that they're listening, there is nothing you can do to stop them. Thanks to the Supreme Court.
And
Catch
thanks
22.
to Congress. You know, we're sitting here saying there is no review of this by a court. So you've got to leave it up to the other two branches of government. You have to leave it to the executive or the Congress, which is terrifying when you consider what's going on with sequester and budgetary things.
It's terrifying to see what's going on when Congress is the one that authorized this, and let's face it, the administration hasn't unwound many of Bush's policies.
No, but and the Supreme Court's not going to be changing its mind anytime soon on this. So you essentially the action to take on this has to be to demand the executive branch knock it off, and that Congress at least put some more transparency in this. Somebody to get in there.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying that every one of our state secrets has to be public. There is safety to be had in certain things, but when you're spying on U.S. citizens, there needs to be a backstop.
Yeah,
and the courts are traditionally that backstop, and they're saying we can't take the case because you can't prove it. And a little side note here: Shelby, Alabama, got in front. And it's a little bit of throwback on standing. This is their statement on how they got into court on this. Shelby County anticipates that, and will require plaintiff, meaning them, to seek preclearance in the near future.
Wait a second. So, according to these same 5 justices, you can't bring a case saying the government may spy on me because no harm has been committed because it's impending, right? No right. Injury.
Because Shelby's not suing over a particular preclearance that that didn't happen. They said we've had to deal with this before, and we anticipate in the future. Well, now I will grant that because they've had it before, and they probably will have to seek preclearance in the future. It's a little easier to prove, but the case that actually is before that court is based on the fact that we anticipate that we're going to have some of our laws thrown out in the future. So you can look at the Supreme Court.
Interesting. So if it's us citizens wanting to protect our rights, it must have already happened. We must have already been injured, according to the Supreme Court. But if you want to make racist laws in Alabama that prevent people from voting, that's fine. That's fine by the conservative justices. Wow. What has this country come to? We're going to be talking about this and more, and moving on to some fun stuff in the next segment. So
John McCain, where is he?
We have to play our game.
We'll play our game when we get back.
All right. So don't go anywhere.
And it works every week. That's the frightening part.
It does. He is the Sunday morning senator, as you know. So we will be right back here on Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Don't go anywhere.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks from the Hal Sparks radio program Mega Worldwide, and you're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Sometimes the cost of winning is so great that you really lose. This little lesson seems to be dawning on several food industry powers. Such huge processors and retailers as ConAgra, PepsiCo, Unilever, and Walmart dumped millions of dollars into last November's monumental labeling battle over California's Proposition 37, which would have required corporations to tell consumers if any of their food products contain ingredients with genetically manipulated DNA. Using piles of political cash, deceptive advertising, and outright lies, the corporate Goliaths squeaked out a narrow victory over a scrappy coalition of consumers, environmentalists, organic producers, and others. But while big money won the election, The corporations lost the hearts and minds of their own customers, for they exposed themselves as greedheads, going to extremes to deny people's right to know what they're putting into their own bodies and into their children's bodies. That's not a winning proposition over the long haul, no matter how much political money they throw at it. Moreover, far from feeling defeated, the pro-labeling coalition was energized by having flushed out of hiding the big brand names that are secretly putting GMO contaminants in our food supply. Having awakened public consciousness, the grassroots coalition has flummoxed the genetic manipulators by not going away. Instead, it has already expanded the political fight for honesty and food purity into Connecticut, Missouri, New Mexico, Vermont, and Washington State. This is Jim Hightower saying, and now the strength of the issue and tenacity of the coalition has pushed a couple of dozen major food peddlers, including PepsiCo and Walmart, to begin talking about switching sides and supporting a national labeling law. To keep up and help push, go to www.organicconsumers.org.
Need an antidote to the progressive blues? Want some good news about how grassroots folks are rebelling against the corporate powers and winning? Well, here's an easy-to-swallow pill for you, the Hightower Lowdown. Hightower's monthly newsletter will give you the lowdown, even as it lifts you up. It's 4 pages a month, jam-packed with facts you can use, actions you can take, and Jim's own Texas humor, all for only $15 a year. To become a lowdowner, go to hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
The AFL-CIO Executive Council approved a resolution supporting a comprehensive energy policy that includes support for pipeline infrastructure expansion. Building trades unions applauded the resolution, interpreting it to mean AFL-CIO support for the controversial Keystone pipeline. In a press statement, the building trades said construction of the project means an immediate opportunity for 20,000 union members to get back to work. The building trades unions say that construction has been mired in a depression for 4 years now, and projects like the Keystone Pipeline are badly needed. The Building and Construction Trades Department praised the AFL-CIO for standing up for jobs. National Nurses United has joined the Amalgamated Transit Union and Transport Workers Union in opposing the Keystone Pipeline. The Nurses Union says that the future of labor should not be scrambling for elusive crumbs thrown down by corporate partners, but advocating for the larger public interest. The reputation labor deservedly earned in the 1930s and 1940s, the period of labor's greatest growth and the resulting emergence of a more egalitarian society. The Blue-Green Alliance, which includes the Sierra Club and unions like the United Auto Workers, the Steel Workers, UFCW, and Communications Workers of America, hasn't taken a position on the Keystone Pipeline. Organized federal workers will have more of a say than unorganized federal workers as to how furloughs come down during the sequester. Jesse Russell reports.
Federal workers aren't completely voiceless on how cuts will come down if the sequester is triggered. Unions representing federal workers, such as the American Federation of Government Workers, have the right to bargain with agencies over how cuts that impact workers are made. They can't directly stop furloughs, but they can require the agency to prove that the decision to furlough workers was the only solution to a budget cut. If it's determined a furlough is necessary, the union can step in and bargain with an agency as to how those furlough days take place. For example, would workers be allowed to exchange furlough days, or can they request to take furlough days in a single chunk instead of spread out over a few months? The earliest the nation will start feeling the impact of potentially hundreds of thousands of federal workers losing pay due to furloughs is April 1st, as agencies are required to give a 30-day notice. The Department of Defense is projecting that at least 800,000 workers will be furloughed. Each worker will be required to take 22 days, and that would amount to a cut in pay of 20%. Workers also don't accrue vacation time when on their furlough.
OSHA has ordered Norfolk Southern Railway to pay workers fired for seeking medical attention for on-the-job injuries. OSHA ordered the railroad to pay the Teamster-represented Brotherhood of Maintenance and Way Workers more than $160,000 in compensatory damages, $75,000 for pain and suffering, attorney fees, and $150,000 in punitive damages.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. And I know many of our listeners do not watch Fox. And I don't blame them.
We have to play a game.
Oh, we have to play a game. Well, this is also a game related to Fox. So Shane's spinning the wheel. Which Sunday morning show will John McCain be on this week?
The Sunday morning senator has struck again. I think for the fourth week in a row. He is on Face the Nation this morning. Face the Nation. I wonder if he's just built like his own like broadcasting booth from his home.
If not, I think Fox has probably dedicated a studio to him.
Well, but he's on Face the Nation, so that's CBS. Right?
Oh, yeah.
We will get to a week where we get to play the game that he's actually not there, but we're going to play this every single week.
Yeah.
Just to point out the fact that John McCain is always, just about, on the Sunday morning shows, exclusively.
You'd think they'd get tired of him. He doesn't say anything different.
I am.
Yeah. So, speaking of media and Fox and some of the Sunday morning talk shows take place.
Oh, that's right, Mitt Romney this morning.
Mitt Romney was on the...
He was on the Fox News Sunday, his first interview. He's doing CPAC.
Yeah, he is. But
Way
Chris
to go,
Christie,
CPAC. Let's talk about the idiot from the last election and not invite one of the most popular Republican governors out there, Chris Christie. You keep up with that. Electoral landslide for the not CPAC people.
Absolutely. But one of our favorite moments of the week, and again...
This was liberal porn.
Yes, many of our listeners do not watch Fox News, but we watch so you don't have to.
We watched this live.
We watched this live.
And then rewound it and watched it again.
It literally stopped Shane and I in our tracks with both working on other various projects. Both stopped, jaws dropping, and stared at the TV until we erupted into applause. Why don't you play a little bit of this liberal porn for our listeners?
Joining me now with some insight, Democratic Congressman Keith Ellison of Minnesota. Congressman, welcome back, sir.
You bet.
I guess that's what we could describe as staying on message, something the Democratic Party, I would argue, is very good at. Let me ask you.
You're pretty good at it, too.
Thank you.
Quite frankly, you are the worst excuse for a journalist I've ever seen.
I am the what? I can't hear you.
You heard me.
I didn't know. Say it again. I didn't hear you.
I heard you. What you just displayed was not journalism. It was yellow journalism. It wasn't anything close to trying to tell the American people what's really going on. And, it's just shocking to
yellow
me
journalism? To play Obama in his own words is yellow journalism?
Well, with the background music and with your lead up before you let the president talk, let me tell you, I was here. Everything.
It just got better and better. It literally, Keith Ellison, representative of Minnesota, went after Sean Hannity like nobody I've ever seen before.
I love this. Where it goes.
Displayed was not journalism.
It sounds so familiar.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it.
Which could apply to just about every Sean Hannity segment ever. But yes, Keith Ellison was our hero this week, not just for his calling out Sean Hannity for the lies that he perpetuates pretty much on every show, But
Not
also,
pretty much. He does on every single show.
Yeah, but also for Ellison's work with the Congressional Progressive Caucus.
Yes.
And the balancing act that they put forward. We're going to get into that a little bit later in the show.
With Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean in just a few minutes. But, Sean Hannity, he really was focusing on real news this week. After that interview, he went on a nice Islamophobic attack against Keith Ellison.
Well, when that happened, you remember what I said? I said if you go over to the conservative blogs and things, when that goes up, they're going to start pulling.
Oh yeah, the racist comments there were just lovely.
Yeah,
yeah.
You knew immediately that's what was going to happen. I knew that Sean Hannity, he's not one. He doesn't like to get smacked around like that, so he's going to use his microphone to beat up on you.
Yeah, but he does it. He does it after.
Oh yeah, and he does
Ellison
it for days,
yes.
and he does it in the cheapest, the same type of journalism that Representative Ellison was talking about. He did the same thing then. Well, you think I'm that? I'll do it to you. That's
right.
exactly what Sean did. He used the same tactics against the person who called him out for the tactics.
Yes, he made anti-Islamic remarks, calling Ellison an anti-Semite and criticizing him for supposed appearances with Farrakhan and Khalid Muhammad, appearances that Representative Ellison had specifically wrote about in 2006 and said he was not aware that these individuals were anti-Semitic, and that when he found out, he distanced himself from these people, and has even been praised by religious leaders, including people like Rabbi Mark Schneier, president and co-founder for Foundation of Ethnic Understanding, specifically talking about Ellison's work to strengthen Muslim-Jewish relations.
Right, but that doesn't matter to Sean Hannity.
No.
He will find one or 2 degrees of separation and then attribute everything that 1 or 2 degrees of separation, whatever that person said, everything they ever said in their entire life, you, of course, endorsed because at some point you did some event with a person.
Yeah. Hannity, after Ellison was sworn in back in 2006, Keith Ellison used a Quran because he is Muslim. He practices that religion. Hannity compared it to swearing in on a copy of Mein Kampf. This was back in 2006. This was a hard-hitting yellow journalism piece by Sean Hannity, saying specifically, where does it stop? Is there any other limitations? Complaining that Ellison didn't use the Bible.
Yeah. And he's the conservative strict constructionist, Sean Hannity, who loves Scalia and Thomas, who, by the way, I'm pretty sure that there's no tome of record in the Constitution for doing a swearing-in ceremony. In fact, I know there isn't any required book.
And the funny part is, during the interview, Ellison obviously called Sean out for being a Republican, to which he replied, "I'm registered conservative."
Yeah. Okay. The difference is, and when's the last time you voted for a Democrat, Sean?
Yes.
When's the last time?
Well, but I'm sorry, the conservative party, it's the same as people suddenly identifying themselves as libertarian or independent. It was just that they were so embarrassed after Bush that they were grasping onto anything except for the Republican
Party. Also, your registration
Party.
status means nothing, especially as journalists, because a lot of them don't register or they register independent.
Yes.
So that they can't be called on this for any type of slant. It's not what you register, Sean, it's what you say every single night. The propaganda you spew. So
right, and he continued that with interviewing Bob Woodward, who was claiming that the White House was threatening him. So, unfortunately, we don't have time to.
Oh, I wish the White House would threaten me by apologizing for raising it. Not that they ever raised their voice to me or ever even talked to us, but it was a letter of apology after obviously a heated discussion, which happens sometimes, and that was a threat. Even Woodward, when he was interviewed, backed off of it completely. Then you had Lanny Davis going out there, who just so happens to have a book coming out next week saying, I've been threatened too. He
had already backed off of the claims that the White House had threatened him, and Hannity's comment in the interview.
Said, I don't know. I mean, I don't know this for a fact. But I would imagine that Fox News would take something and then exaggerate what Bob Woodward had said.
Well, this was after Woodward had come out saying that, embarrassed about the whole
scenario.
The
email itself was actually reviewed.
Right.
It was revealed.
Sean Hannity's quote during that interview, the Obama administration, they're going to be the ones who regret picking this fight. Really? With Bob Woodward? God, he's so stupid. He's just stupid. I'm sorry. There's just nothing else I could say. And if that's an attack on Sean Hannity, I'm perfectly comfortable with that.
Oh, yeah.
I'll do it in defense of Keith Ellison. So anyhow, you are listening to Talking Left. We are just minutes away from talking with Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio about so many pressing issues. We're very excited to have him on coming up very soon. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
See, that wasn't so bad, was it?
Ooh, I gotta say, that was fantastic.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, friends. This is Tom Hartman.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hey, this is Hal Sparks.
I'm Brad Friedman. I approve of Nicole Sandler's RadioOrNot.com.
Radio or not?
Radio or not?
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com.
RadioOrNot.com. RadioOrNot.com.
Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, and you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/TimCormall. That's CORRIMAL. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Bill Maher, you're here in Miami on Friday night. You're doing a show at the Fillmore at the Jackie Gleason Theater. They just renamed this theater the Fillmore. And they put up a couple of psychedelic posters. So I guess...
Was it the theater Jackie did his TV show from?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
What I hear they did is put up two of those old Bill Graham posters and renamed it.
Yeah, I can't think of two different icons of show business.
Yeah, really.
Bill Graham and Jackie Gleason.
Yeah, why they just didn't play up the Jackie Gleason aspect, I don't know. But then again, this is South Florida.
Right. Okay.
Welcome to it.
I feel warned.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime at RadioOrNot.com.
You know that the ice cream scoop has the power to make a child smile, and that by slowing us down, the traffic light can keep us going. You know that the golf tee brings friends together, that the mailbox keeps them connected. You know that the cataract laser helps you look to the future, while the pacemaker ensures that there's a future to be seen. You know that the lawnmower, the clothes dryer, and the elevator make life easier, that the blood bank makes life possible. You know that these things we count on every day started as ideas. But did you know all these ideas came from the minds of African Americans? Support minority education today so we don't miss out on the next big idea tomorrow. The United Negro College Fund. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Please visit uncf.org or call 1-800-332-UNCF. Brought to you by UNCF and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station.
It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. 1913 was the year that marked the first time big oil got a subsidy that was written into the U.S. tax code. At that time, they were able to write off 5% of costs from oil and gas wells beginning March 1st of that year. Today, oil companies can write off 3 times that much, 15% of costs of oil and gas wells.
Now, what was the thought? I mean, is this in this article back in 19? What was the thinking behind this of these subsidies?
It doesn't go into everything here, but it's called the percentage depletion subsidy. Essentially, because as more oil is extracted, it costs more to get the oil afterwards.
So to help them out, so that because
similar to depreciation, what you would write off on an asset.
But the reason you have a subsidy there is because you want to encourage the action, and there are financial things that got in the way back in the early 1900s, but we need more of this. So in order to encourage businesses that otherwise would lose money doing this, we're going to help them out because it's good for all of society.
Right.
That's why we do subsidies, right?
Right.
Things have changed.
Yeah, we have since tripled that deduction, and it has
How much? What percentage of the profits gone up by? I mean, who knows? I mean, it's thousands of percent.
That would be, I don't have the percentage, but it's interesting to note that in 2012, just BP, Chevron, ConocoPhillips, and ExxonMobil earned $118 billion with a B, in profits. The year before that, those companies earned $137 billion in profits. Why exactly do they need tax breaks?
Yeah, because the issue back in the early 1900s doesn't exist anymore.
Right.
Maybe this is a perpetuation of corporate entitlements.
I think it is.
I think
and
it is
here's
by
news
definition.
to Republicans. Even Ronald Reagan, even St. Ronnie himself, once asked for tax reforms and tax breaks for oil companies to be eliminated. How about that? He said in a 1985
There you go again.
In a 1985 speech, quote, "By eliminating this special preference will go a long way toward ensuring that those that earn their wealth in the oil industry will be subject to the same taxes as the rest of us." That is from Ronald freaking Reagan.
Also, one could argue, I think, that when you're trying to introduce other types of energy, cleaner types of energy for a new century, that when you are comparing prices and they say, well, solar is so expensive compared to, well, it's because you're subsidizing the other side and artificially keeping the price down with these subsidies.
Well,
why don't we compare apples with apples here?
That's also, as we've heard some really great, smart people say recently, because of the externalities that aren't factored into the cost of oil. But oil companies don't have to pay for their pollution. They don't have to pay for the injuries and allergies and poison that they're pumping into the atmosphere.
We're actually paying them to put all that in the atmosphere.
Right. This tax credit that's now reached its 100th year, as of March 1st of this year, was the 100th anniversary of these tax breaks.
And how much was the tax break? Does it say there last year alone?
Well, it doesn't say specifically, but it says it
because I'm wondering if it's around.
But eliminates federal taxes for independent producers.
I would imagine that's. I don't know. It would go a long way into cutting into that $85 billion. I would imagine. Though.
Yes, in fact, closing this tax break would save $11.2 billion over 10 years. So yes, it would be a long way in helping out this country. But I think that's not even 10% of just their profits in 1 year. Right. That's the benefit it would give us over 10 years. It wouldn't even cut their profit by 10%.
Right.
It's absurd.
Yeah, and we also know what they're doing to gas prices right now. We talked about this last week, as Keystone XL is coming up. Very interesting.
Yes, and we're going to be talking to someone who has been leading the fight and been covering the Keystone Pipeline and so many other important issues for a very long time. And our buddy, our pal, very honored to have Jacob Dean coming up next. So don't go anywhere. You're listening to Talking Left with Danielle and Shano, and we will be right back.
It's Thursday, February 28, 2013.
If we really are in a situation where we have low snow consistently for the future, that's a whole different business model.
Climate change already affecting Rocky Mountain skiing.
Climate change is real. Across the Pacific Islands region, the frequency and intensity of climate extremes are changing.
House Democrats smack Republicans for obstructing climate action. Shell Oil calls it quits in the Arctic, for now. Fox News makes a stunning admission. Plus, finally some good news for kids in Detroit.
All of that good news and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
In America, you have a right to be stupid.
Exercising all of our rights, this is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, a rather stunning admission brought to our attention this morning by occasional Brad Blog contributor D.R. Tucker. He notes an article at Fox News which starts this way. Quote, new technological advances make it possible in the near future to engineer a coal-powered car so clean that it produces nearly no polluting emissions, including carbon dioxide. What? Experts tell FoxNews.com.
What? You mean they acknowledged that carbon dioxide is a polluting emission?
They apparently did. Of course, that's only on their website. It hasn't made it onto their TV yet, where they routinely poo-poo the idea that carbon dioxide is a pollutant. Oh, it's just plant food, they tell us as they breathe out quickly to show us how they're polluting. But anyway, so there's some good news. A technological breakthrough leads to a reporting breakthrough, a truth breakthrough on FoxNews.com.
We'll see how long that lasts.
You're right.
Now on to the news. While oil giant BP is on trial for the worst offshore oil spill in the nation's history down in the Gulf of Mexico, up in the Arctic, Royal Dutch Shell has decided to call it quits for now. After spending more than $5 billion, Shell announced this week it will not drill in the Arctic this summer after a nonstop string of ridiculous, embarrassing, and expensive failures in the harsh extremes of the Arctic, including a rig grounding on an Alaskan island last month. In a statement, Shell said the company is, quote, committed to drill there again in the future. And now the Justice Department has been brought in to investigate Shell for numerous violations of environmental and safety regulations that were found by the Coast Guard. Meanwhile, the Interior Department has announced an emergency review of Arctic drilling policy and permits, but they did emphasize that the goal of the review is not whether or not they will continue to allow Arctic drilling.
Well, what's the goal?
Oh, just to see if they can improve the process.
This was the scheme, was it not, that the Coast Guard was begging the Interior Department not to approve. The Coast Guard said, if there's a spill, we can't respond to it up in the Arctic. And now it's just been plagued with one disaster after another, as if to say, oh, we told you so.
Here's something the corporate media didn't tell you this week. In the U.S. House of Representatives, House Democrats have been slamming the Republican majority for its obstruction in addressing climate change, like new representative from Hawaii, Tulsi Gabbard, who says man-made climate change is already drying out Hawaii.
Hawaii is usually thought of as a lush green paradise, but droughts have been more frequent and prolonged. For example, earlier this month, the Big Island of Hawaii was declared a natural disaster due to ongoing extreme drought conditions going back to July of 2008.
Drought is also impacting the already arid West. Northern California on Thursday officially broke the record for its all-time driest January and February in recorded history. The Northern Sierra Nevadas have seen only 2 inches of precipitation when it normally gets 1.5 feet. Changes in the snow season are hitting the multi-billion-dollar ski industry in the Rockies faster than predicted. PBS NewsHour reports that ski resorts are increasingly relying on expensive artificial snowmaking, and it's only going to get worse, predicts Mark Williams, snow hydrologist with the University of Colorado.
Snow accumulation starts later, and snow melt starts earlier. And that's going to have all kinds of repercussions in terms of water availability, in terms of recreation, in terms of ecosystem services. The list goes on.
Williams projects that as early as 2030, less than 20 years from now, the snow line at Aspen Mountain could move up as much as 2,400 feet from the base. It's the opposite problem in Europe, where Greece, Italy, and Britain are reeling from torrential rainfall. 2 people were killed in flash flooding in Athens this week, while British farmers are quitting after 2 successive years of relentless flooding, with 2012 bringing the UK's wettest year on record. Finally, some good news.
Finally.
In the beleaguered city of Detroit, a policy to reduce lead contamination in communities is working. Levels of toxic lead in Detroit's kids have dropped 70% in less than 10 years. Lead affects children's brain development, and contamination is highest in industrial areas. Environmental Health News warns the number of children with elevated lead levels in Detroit and the Rust Belt still remain higher than the national average, but it's going in the right direction, and it shows remediation does work.
There you go again, you and your nanny state. If the kids want to eat lead, I say let them. For more on all of these stories, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. While you're there, please consider a donation to help us stay on your public airwaves. From bradblog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
This is Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are checking us out. Progressive Blend Radio, RadioOrNot.com, SoFlo Radio, or, of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, WPWC in Washington, D.C.
Your perpetuation of liberal entitlement.
Yes, that is so our new catchline. I absolutely love it. And joining us now is the one, the only, the host of Filter Free Radio and All Things Awesome, Jacob Dean. Good morning, Jacob.
Good morning, guys. How's it going there?
It's going great, and we even get Jacob's amazing, adorable video on our Ustream feed. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, bright and early over here on the West Coast in Portland, but it's always good to be on with you guys, and there's always tons to talk about, and that's why we need independent voices out there telling it like it is.
Absolutely. One of the things I know you have been following, and you've been really active and passionate about, is the Keystone XL pipeline. And just this week, it did cause a false alarm a little bit in the media of people saying the Keystone pipeline had been approved. Upon further reading, it's specifically that the State Department has approved the Keystone pipeline as, quote, environmentally sound. While not as bad as the whole pipeline being approved, I'm pretty concerned with this language. What do you think, Jacob?
At this point, still no surprises. Unfortunately, I hate to sound so cynical or skeptical. Maybe Scott's rubbing off on me a little bit, but but it's unfortunate that despite most recently having the largest rally on climate change ever in the United States of America history, there at the National Mall in Washington, D.C., and despite all of the actions over the last year, ever since going back to August of 2011 now, since when Bill McKibben and 350.org, those folks really first started organizing some of the first big rallies around stopping the Keystone pipeline. It's really clear to those of us who are aware that an energy policy based on a non-renewable resource is by definition non-sustainable. So you would think that more people would be willing to just simply, I guess, admit. It's like the 12-step thing. You have to admit that we have an oil problem. And then you have to realize that, we can't eat money and we cannot drink oil. And then, you start to ask yourself, well, how come we're not really, like you were talking about, putting all of our focus, all of our energy, all of our resources into sustainable, renewable energy, wind, solar, etc.? Why are we still giving these fossil fuel industry which, by the way, makes plenty of money. They're doing just fine. Thank you very much. Why are we still giving them so much taxpayer subsidy?
While at the same time criticizing programs like Solyndra, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, so one thing wasn't effective. Did we give up on every vaccine trial after it didn't work right off the bat? Do we stop cancer research because all the money we've put into it hasn't been successful yet? Do we stop trying to cure every disease a child has, like juvenile diabetes, because we haven't figured it out just yet? These are investments that we need for the long term. Don't you agree?
Oh, absolutely. And if there's any investment that we cannot do without in the long term, it is our habitat. It is the from which we survive. It is literally, just on the most basic level of human existence, without clean air that we can breathe and clean water that we can drink and a clean habitat in which we can survive in, we will not survive. So your economy can, all of the other things kind of become secondary. All the other issues can arguably become secondary to the climate, which should be a primary focus, as and we so often tend to forget that we're like connected in with the nature. We're connected. It's all one. It's all connected together, and it's all kind of interdependent. Well, and if the climate goes down, we go down.
I'm interested in your take because I read this supplemental EIS, the environmental study that the State Department released saying the project is environmentally sound. And I'm wondering if Obama and the State Department aren't putting some clues of their position in this bill, and as well as with nominating John Kerry of Secretary of State. Number one, this report is subject to a 45-day comment period for the public to weigh in, but this is only one report on the environmental impact. The next report will be an analysis of whether or not the project is, quote, in the national interest, and there'll be another 90 days for that report. But in this one, they specifically say that the proposed project is unlikely to have a substantial impact on the rate of development in oil sands or the amount of heavy crude oil refined in the Gulf Coast area. So it seems like they're already out with talking points, basically saying this isn't going to affect gas prices here in the United States. This isn't going to increase our gasoline supply here. And it also talks about the CO2 emissions and compares it to 626,000 passenger vehicles operating for one entire year, or 398,000 homes using electricity for 1 year. So saying America can meet its energy needs without this project. That's what this same EIS study is saying, whereas everybody is focusing on that one line that it's environmentally sound, which, granted, is ridiculous. Doesn't it seem like maybe there are some breadcrumbs here that instead of trying to argue the environmental side, the Obama administration may say, we don't need it. This will not help our energy supply here in America. Thoughts?
That would be amazing. That would be fantastic. Any step, any angle, any playing chess versus checkers, whatever the Obama administration has to do to stop the construction of the Keystone Pipeline, I am all for it.
But that statement right there essentially says all this is we're giving Keystone a cheaper way to get oil to the refineries, and there'll be no benefit whatsoever in terms of supply. And on top of it, while there won't be a huge environmental impact, there's going to be impact on our infrastructure. There's going to be roads that these trucks drive over to get the materials in there. I mean, just to mention one. So why are we doing it? It makes no sense whatsoever. And you're going to still hear conservatives out there saying, well, look at gas prices. They're going to get to $5 unless we do this. And that's a bunch of bull from what that sentence says.
Right.
And what is environmentally sound? That's really loose kind of language there. And I mean, how is that defined? And and what kind of falls underneath that. And so if you know, it's environmentally sound. How so?
It would be interesting to find if the BP rig at any point had an EIS that said it was environmentally sound.
Yeah, that would be astonishing if we found that report, huh?
Yeah, and it's like you have all of this evidence out there in the real world, in reality, in things like the BP oil disaster in the Gulf of Mexico, the Exxon Valdez, all of the, you know, the Kalamazoo spill in Michigan. I mean, you have the evidence in the real world that says oil leaks. It's not just a matter of if or not; it's a matter of when, and the whole energy. The whole energy discussion, I mean, right now, just off topic slightly, in the Pacific Northwest up in Washington State, there's a huge discussion around nuclear power because Hanford has nuclear tanks that are leaking nuclear waste. And again, you still have folks out there, yeah, we need more nuclear power. So it's clear that there's some extent of detachment from reality.
Yeah, and that plant up there, 6 tanks leaking, we reported on that last weekend. And even more dangerous than the energy situation is that was a weapons manufacturing plant. We shouldn't even be using nuclear energy for energy because of its volatile nature. But should we be developing weapons with it? Or, our president was one of the leading proponents of eliminating nuclear weapons in the world or reducing them. And that's a clear indication of the problem we have when we try and produce more.
Absolutely. And so you have the nuclear plants leaking, you have the oil disasters, and it's clear that, again, it's a detachment from reality. And I guess the real question becomes, what is it going to take to get, our elected officials, people in Congress, the people who are supposed to be representing us, what is it going to take to get everyone to realize that reality kind of trumps all of the other belief, and what you believe or what your party line you have to tote stands for, etc., or what the special interest money that pays you for your re-elections tells you have to do, that is not nearly as important as what is real.
Yeah.
And so if the capitalism game continues to destroy everything at all costs for more profit and we're doomed, then it's really going to take a lot of us to stand up and do something about it. And it's not quite there yet, I don't think.
It's not quite there yet, but the Keystone Pipeline is one of those examples that has galvanized environmentalist groups together and gotten them to support the general causes instead of fighting for one particular agency or group or another. And I witnessed this personally after the BP oil spill where, there was an opportunity in South Florida for all those groups to work together and fight together against BP and that, disaster that happened in the Gulf. And it was very difficult to stop groups from simply promoting one cause or another that they specifically supported and from campaigning to get people to sign up for X group or Y activist plan. And the Keystone Pipeline has finally managed to get those groups to come together and work for one greater cause. We saw this in the climate rally that you mentioned, 35,000 people of all of these different groups, Sierra Club, 350.org, etc. All of these groups working together for one cause. So it may be scary. I'm trying to read the tea leaves here and see that maybe Obama administration is trying to find a way around approving this pipeline. But that activism, that need for us working together, maybe this pipeline is the catalyst for it.
Absolutely. And my co-host Scott on the Filter Free show that we do, who's there in D.C. as well, went down for a portion of that rally that Sunday. And I thought one of the highlights there, like you said, all the different organizations and nonprofits, there was something like 120-something different organizations there. Michael Brune, the executive director of the Sierra Club, I thought made a really significant stance, breaking a 120-year tradition of the Sierra Club and actually participating in a civil disobedience demonstration. And they got arrested in front of the White House for not, moving out of the way of,
Yes.
But it's really fascinating to see all those people be able to come together and make that statement heard, and that is a very significant thing. And breaking a 120-year-old tradition of the Sierra Club, it's obvious that drastic times are calling for drastic measures. It's to a certain extent.
Absolutely. And if the Sierra Club can break a 120-year tradition, I certainly think we can break a 100-year tradition and end oil subsidies for big oil companies.
Absolutely.
So we do have to run to a break. Jacob, you'll be with us for the whole hour, and we're very excited about that. We want to get into things more people need to come together on, like the Congressional Progressive Caucus's plan that could have avoided the sequester. We're speaking with Jacob Dean. He is the host of Filter Free Radio. You can check it out at filterfreeradio.com, and it's awesome, by the way, very inspirational. And we will be right back here on Talking Left. Don't go anywhere.
I think I'm running out of energy. Seems like we use an awful lot for heating and lighting and driving, reading and writing and jiving. Energy, you'd think we'd be saving it up.
It's our last errand today, Jimmy. Just need to pick up some light bulbs.
Whoa, there's so many. Did Grandma tell you which ones to buy?
No, but check out the label on this package. It'll help us find the right bulbs.
Does it really matter?
Well, sure. The new light bulbs use a lot less energy, so we save money on our electric bill by using an energy-saving incandescent, CFL, or LED.
How about this bulb?
Let's see. We need to replace the 60-watt bulbs in our bedside lamps. That one is 800 lumens, so it should do the trick.
I've never heard of lumens.
Lumens tell us how bright the light is. The more lumens, the brighter the bulb.
You know, Grandpa, you're a pretty bright guy.
Yeah, you're pretty smart yourself, Jimmy.
Lumens, the new way to shop for light. Learn more at EnergySavers.gov. That's EnergySavers.gov. A message from the U.S. Department of Energy.
You may be hearing about people having trouble making mortgage payments and risking losing their homes. Many of them just aren't aware of the options that can prevent foreclosure. There are many options available to homeowners, such as repayment and forbearance plans, loan modifications, and even refinancing. Where does someone go for help? They should talk directly with their lender or a qualified HUD-approved counseling agency. Both can provide helpful information without charging a fee. According to PMI Mortgage Insurance Company, it's not a good idea to pay for services that you can get for free from a lender or a qualified nonprofit counseling agency. To learn more, visit homesafepmi.com or call HUD at 1-800-569-4287 for a counseling agency near you. That's 1-800-569-4287. This message is brought to you by PMI, supporting sustainable home ownership that strengthens communities.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at WEAC Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the ARC. The ARC is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The ARC is also home to the ARC Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the ARC, so stop by and see them. The ARC, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the ARC's website, www.thearcdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The ARC, part of Southeast D.C.
This is Stephanie Miller.
Hi, this is Tom Harmon.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Schuster of Take Action News.
I'm Brad Friedman of BradBlog.com.
Hi, I'm cartoonist and agent provocateur P.S. Mueller.
This is Nicole Bell of crooksandliars.com, and this is...
You're listening to
and watching
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Great presidents aren't born, they are made. We've got to push people. They don't jump out in front of a parade if there's not a parade there. That is political suicide. The parade, metaphorically, already has to be in the streets with the picket signs saying, we need progressive talk in Portland, or we need marriage equality in Washington, or we need marijuana legalization in Colorado, you know, whatever.
Trans-Canada Pipeline.
Stop
the pipeline.
We have to push for our positions because they're not just going to out of thin air.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are speaking with Jacob Dean, the host of Filter Free Radio. You got to listen to the show because you can win one of these awesome bumper stickers. You can check it out every Monday and Wednesday at filterfreeradio.com. And, of course, our fellow online station, radioornot.com. Jacob, thank you for hanging out with us this morning. We know it is super early over there on the West Coast.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure, guys.
Well, we missed you. The big news this week, of course, was the sequester deadline came and went, and Congress went out for the weekend, went home. But what most people may not have heard is the support for the Congressional Progressive Caucus plan called the Balancing Act. Have you heard about this Business Insider poll, Jacob, showing the broad support for the CPC's plan?
No, I haven't.
It's really interesting. When polled without party labels attached, so when Business Insider polled registered voters and asked them which plan to avoid the sequester that they approved of, the majority of both parties supported the Progressive Caucus's Balancing Act, which essentially had one-to-one ratios of cuts and revenues. Both parties supported the plan. When asked, Republicans actually supported the sequester over the proposed House Republican plan, but yet they came out in favor of the I cannot say this to save my life, Congressional Progressive Caucus's plan. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. The red flag for me is coming up somewhere around, do we have an information deficiency? Is there an issue with low information or disinformation or misinformation or mass propaganda outlets? It's clear that, like you said, if you take away all the labels, and people don't know that, oh, well, that's a liberal idea, liberals, if you take out those Rush Limbaugh embedded dog whistle language, attack the other team because they're bad for some reason, as long as you take out those labels and you say, what about this idea? Oh, that's the best idea. How come they aren't doing that? Well, that's because most of the elected officials really aren't that progressive, or their hands are tied, or...
The bill wasn't even considered on Thursday before Congress left for the weekend. The Senate bill essentially would have replaced the sequester with $55 billion in cuts and $55 billion in revenue. That got 51 votes, which should have passed, but was filibustered. And Republicans only got 38 votes because their plan is essentially just make Obama decide what to cut so they can blame him later. 47% of Republicans even preferred the House Progressive plan to across-the-board cuts pushed by their leaders, and overwhelmingly preferred it over giving Obama this quote-unquote flexibility that the Republicans are trying to term it. The Balancing Act would have replaced the sequester with $960 billion in revenue, would have eliminated $278 billion in wasteful Pentagon spending, would have given a one-year tax credit of $800 for low- and middle-income families, prevented 280,000 teachers from being laid off, modernized 35,000 public schools, and invest in infrastructure, and help protect 3.5 million jobs by 2020. Yet, they didn't even consider this bill in Congress. Didn't even get to come up for a vote. Seems a little strange to me.
Yeah. And then, of course, you have the Speaker of the House come out a few days ago and use some colorful language to call out his cohorts in the Senate. Ironically, it's, the House has come up with 2 bills and we have to come up with another bill and the Senate isn't doing anything. And ironically, it's the minority in the Senate, the Republicans, who are filibustering anything in the Senate. So it's like, as long as you don't pay attention to what's going on and you're kind of low informed about everything, then they will continue to manipulate it to their advantage. And that's clearly what's going on.
Yeah, it really is interesting. Common Dreams is the one that wrote about this poll showing that the American people, if given a choice, would have asked for the balancing act that progressives in the House put forward.
The key phrase there being given a choice.
If given a choice.
They were not given that choice by our leaders,
and
so-called leaders.
Common Dreams sums it up really well at the end of this article. That our most intractable problem, the best and most attractive ideas to voters and regular people, are seemingly the ones that are most sidelined by elites who control our money-dominated media and govern our money-dominated democracy. Well said by Common Dreams there as to, it's money is the reason this didn't get considered. Anyhow, we do have to run back to a break, and we have so much more in store afterwards. You're listening to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We're speaking with the one and only Jacob Dean of Filter Free Radio. So don't go anywhere. We'll all be right back.
So, who is responsible for these outrages? It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
While we sports fans regularly lionize the stars of pro baseball, football, basketball, etc., it's time to acknowledge that the team executives and owners also are great sports, and they routinely make dazzling off-the-field moves. The Miami Herald recently spotlighted one such star up in the owner's box at the Miami Dolphins football stadium. Team CEO Mike D. was asked in a TV interview whether a nearly $200 million taxpayer subsidy proposed for the team's privately owned stadium is welfare for billionaires. Rather than trying an end run around the obvious point that the owners ought to pay for their own stadium, D plowed straight ahead, running like a Hall of Fame fullback right up the middle of the question. Rich people, he explained, should not invest money in a way that is unwise. What a sporting fellow. Just toss the unwise investment to taxpayers. Let them fumble it. Herald writer Glenn Garvin notes that the Carolina Panthers ran an $80 million pass play at Charlotte's city officials to refurbish the stadium the team owns. When those local defenders of taxpayers' money offered little resistance, the Panthers quickly called an audible, going long for a Hail Mary pass of $125 million in subsidies. Then, owner Jerry Richardson was brought in to face a closed-door meeting with the city council. It looked bad for the team at first, but Jerry turned it around with some deft inside maneuvers, sprinting out of the meeting with a total score of nearly $144 million in public funds. This is Jim Hightower saying, all across the country, from Tampa Bay to San Francisco Bay, these corporate laterals and quarterback sneaks are ripping off taxpayers for billions of dollars. Money that should go to public needs, not private profits. To check out the game in your area, go to www.fieldofschemes.com. Fieldofschemes.com.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the Lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the Lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
SEIU Secretary-Treasurer Eliseo Medina says we need to seize this political moment that makes comprehensive immigration reform possible. Medina says reform that ends the exploitation and living in the shadows for millions of undocumented immigrants is good for the economy and also good for both American and immigrant workers.
We cannot fix the economy for American workers as long as we have 11 million people in that situation, because then employers use them to drive wages down for everybody. And so what we need is a system so that every worker in this country has the same rights and can join together with their fellow workers to fight together for better wages. So the moment now, and I do believe it is a moment that we haven't had for a long time, is that we can allow these 11 million people to legalize their status and be able to have a path to citizenship so that they are just like the rest of us and have the same rights, obligations, responsibilities.
Medina says immigration reform must also make sure that immigrants who come here in the future can do so in a legal process with the full protection of U.S. labor laws. The AFL-CIO Executive Council this week called for a high-wage economy to replace the stagnation it says has crippled the middle class for more than a generation. To get there, the AFL-CIO says the right of workers to collectively bargain must be restored, the minimum wage must rise, and immigration reform must raise labor standards for all workers. The future of marriage will be argued next month, and organized labor is lining up on the side of equality. Jesse Russell reports.
Next month, the Supreme Court will hear arguments on the constitutionality of the Defense of Marriage Act and California's Proposition 8. Yesterday, some of the biggest players in organized labor announced their intention to file an amicus brief in both cases, siding with the opponents of those two pieces of legislation. If the court upholds rulings that struck down Prop 8 and DOMA, it would set a precedent for legalizing same-sex marriage in the United States. The SEIU, AFL-CIO, Change to Win, and National Education Association all filed, saying that Prop 8 and DOMA are discriminatory, as they result in same-sex couples unfairly paying higher taxes, not receiving the same health care benefits, and being denied workers' compensation and death or survivor benefits. In a statement, SEIU Executive Vice President Valerie Long said federal laws should not financially penalize some workers simply because of whom they love and with whom they choose to build their life.
More than 400 locked-out American Crystal Sugar workers can get unemployment benefits now thanks to a ruling from the North Dakota Supreme Court. The workers are part of more than 1,300 who have been locked out since August of 2011. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
I'm sick of the sequestration. It's giving me some frustration. I'm down with the sequestration. It's stopping the whole damn nation. I'm sick of the sequestration. It's government constipation.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. We are speaking with our wonderful friend, somebody we hold near and dear, Mr. Jacob Dean, host of Filter Free Radio. You can check out his show at filterfreeradio.com, as well as every Monday and Wednesday on radioornot.com and Progressive Blend Radio as well. Thanks for hanging out with us, Jacob. We always love speaking with you.
Nice bumper. and right back at
Rocky Mountain Mike. He wrote our wonderful intro music. We put his link up with every show, and we also use any of his parodies when we get the opportunity. That one was too good to pass up.
Perfect.
Yes.
Mike, you're the best.
Absolutely. And, you know, he made a parody there about the sequester. It was something we all hoped would be avoided and that Congress would, for some reason, suddenly compromise. But as we all pretty much expected, that didn't happen. And so now we're bracing for $85 billion in federal cuts that, are already beginning to hit people as furlough notices have already gone out to federal employees. Were you surprised that Congress didn't reach the 11th hour deal that they typically do, Jacob?
You know, I was going to say yes, but I think I'm reanalyzing that question really quick in my brain, and I'm thinking no, only because I've been thinking about kind of I don't know, I don't want to refer to it as a laziness, but I guess the drive for more convenience in every facet of our lives these days, I think is breeding a kind of desensitizing, and we're becoming desensitized to, you know, it's like crisis after crisis after crisis after economic crisis after economic crisis. It's pretty soon it's like, oh, well, you know, here we got another crisis again, but it doesn't register as a crisis. Yeah. And so I think this desensitizing to these crises, whether they're actual or manufactured or who knows what, I think that's a bad thing, because if you can only cry wolf so many times before, you know, when the real wolf comes and you're like woof woof, and then you get eaten. You know the story, right?
Exactly. And Congress has. They've created, you know, disaster after disaster, and then solved it at sometimes the last possible second to avoid some impending economic doom. And so a lot of our country just simply wasn't paying attention this time, didn't believe them, doesn't believe that it's another disaster coming, because they've done this so many times recently that people just tuned out.
There's an interesting article. You should check it out at the Washington Post. They went down there and they were talking to some people in an airfield, all conservatives, saying, yeah, sequester is the best thing. We need to cut. And then they informed them that at this airfield, which is a small airfield, they're closing down the control tower. Like, what? Well, we don't like that cut. So when it actually impacts a person's life, right now these are abstractions. As they start affecting people's lives, I think that the political winds will shift. What concerns me is that you're going to have a bunch of talking heads out there, especially on the right, using essentially the arguments that are used for climate change. See, it's snowing outside, so there's no climate change. They'll say, see, there's no Armageddon here. It was no big deal. We can cut some more.
Well, and Obama himself said in a press conference this week, it's not going to be an apocalypse, but I think, as some people have said, it's just dumb, and it's going to hurt. It's going to hurt individual people, and it's going to hurt the economy overall. Think Progress highlighted some of the dumbest and most painful cuts in this sequester. I'll just name a few, but in early childhood home visiting programs, mother, infant, and early childhood, $20 million. Aging and disability services, $75 million cut. $199 million cut from public housing. $19 million from housing for the elderly. Education. The rehabilitation services and disability research, $184 million cut from that. Student financial assistance, $86 million. The Republicans constantly worried about the safety and security of our borders, $512 million from the Customs and Border Protection. And this is the result of their refusal to cooperate, the refusal to listen to what the American people wanted. Do you think this will finally wake people up, Jacob?
I sure hope so. And I see a common theme in everything you listed there, Danielle. Women, children, seniors, elderly, rehab, disability, pretty much like the least among us or the poorest among us. And the hypocrisy on the right, especially on the people on the right who really consider themselves to be religious or Christian, and they kind of use that meme. And it's like, if Colbert once said, if this is going to be a Christian nation that doesn't help the poor, then either you got to pretend that Jesus really was as selfish as we are, or you've got to acknowledge that he commanded us to love the poor and serve them without any condition, and then admit that we just really don't want to do that. Yeah. And it's just blunt austerity to the least among us, to the poorest among us, because that's, you know, where they can get away with cutting, and those people really don't have much money to hire lobbyists or get PR firms behind their positions or these kinds of things. And where is all of the oh, by the way, this in the I just forgot how to say that. Sequestration. And where is also in their light items, repeal the Bush tax cuts, establish a millionaire surtax, in the tax breaks for outsourcing overseas, in the fossil fuel industry tax breaks, in the abusive offshore tax breaks.
Oh, you mean all the things that
fee?
You mean all the things that the American people overwhelmingly support and wanted in that plan? Yeah, they're not there.
all of the things that target the people who really are not contributing their fair share.
Yeah, no, as it stands right now, the ratio of cuts to revenue, and revenue being just the eliminating of some of the Bush tax cuts, stands 3-1. 3-1 cuts versus revenue. 3 times as much painful austerity as, God forbid, the rich people might have to pay a few more dollars.
Remember the famous part of that, one of the 736 GOP debates, would you be in favor 10-1? And they would not do it. So I think they're pissed off they even have 3-1.
Yeah. The one thing that I hope is in the upcoming budget reconciliation at the end of March, the continuing resolution, that they'll be able to undo and fix some of this. Although I feel it's unlikely that the Republicans are going to change tactics now because they think this is a win politically. They've come out and said, quote, it's a home run. They've refused to put any more revenue on the table, and they've said the sequester is something, quote, that needs to happen. So I don't see why that's going to change in a month, but...
And when you look at this final agreement that we came to with the White House, I got 98% of what I wanted. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah. But perhaps as some of these cuts start, people will get pissed off enough to let the Republicans know that I don't care how much you gerrymander a district, you piss enough people off, the vote's going to go the other way.
Exactly. And in a time where that particular party is in a identity crisis, it is in a, how do we move forward as a relevance in, the future of politics in this country? They are in a crisis, whether they admit it or not. And I guess the question for the Republican Party at the moment would be, if we want to continue to be a relevance in the conversation, look at the Whig Party, for example. It's not uncommon for political parties to, go extinct. But I guess the question becomes, do we have the courage to face our realities? And the realities are, you can only impose austerity on the poor and the 99% so much before you hit a certain breaking point, a threshold at which they won't take it anymore.
Right.
And I'm not encouraging whatsoever any sort of violence or violent revolution at all. I think the real revolution starts in your mind and in your own personal lives.
And I don't think it has to come to that. Look at what we're seeing in Europe with protests, and look at what we just saw in Italy with a comedian getting 25% of the vote. Because he simply opposed austerity. Those are the type of results that could happen here if Republicans don't change their tactics. And a lot of Democrats, too, for that matter.
Yeah, can we all take a look in the mirror and say, are we going to be part of the solution, or are we going to be part of the problem? Because it takes a real honest person to admit that, yeah, I'm part of the solution and I'm a little bit part of the problem. I want to fight climate change, but then I got to go get in my car and drive to the grocery store or whatever. And it is what it is, because the culture in society, it is what it is. And so you can obey or you can rebel or whatever. But it's pretty obvious, I guess. If nothing else is clear, what is clear is it is so obvious the corruption and the dishonesty and no longer in the best interest of we the people. And you see the outrage, the Occupy Wall Street, the Tea Party, from all sides. People are upset. People are paying attention. So if there is hope that people are paying attention. And as long as we're out here doing our part to try to get people more informed and maybe redirect some of that mischanneled or misinformed anger, from, folks on the right over onto our side, that would be a good thing.
It's interesting that gerrymandering may be the very reason that the Republican Party has this identity crisis, because it allows such radicals to get in there and split that party in half. So while they were trying to entrench their power, they may lose it altogether.
Right, because, these cuts to the programs that they've, forced to happen, these are broad cuts that are going to affect everybody, regardless of political persuasion. And eventually, enough people are going to get frustrated and stand up. It's not going to matter what, their voter ID card says. So, Jacob, are you able to stick around with us for the last 10 minutes here? We have a nice, funny segment coming up.
Absolutely.
All right. You are listening to Talking Left. Me, Danielle, and Shano. Thanks for checking us out on We Act Radio, 1480 AM. We will be right back with more, so don't go anywhere.
Yeah, sorry about that. The show's gotten a little lowbrow.
What are you talking about? It's like the most hilarious show ever.
It's Talking Left with Danielle and Shano.
Hi, this is Tim Cormall from The Tim Cormall Show. Join me and my guests most weeks for a progressive roundtable discussion about politics, news, and other fun topics. We laugh a lot about the hilarious antics of the right-wing nutjobs, as well as have serious discussions about issues affecting all of our lives. You can check out The Tim Cormall Show at timcormall.com, and you can subscribe to the show for free in iTunes by searching for The Tim Cormall Show. You can also follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Tim Cormall. That's CORRIMAL. So come on over and join in the fun at timcormall.com.
You're listening to and watching Filter Free Radio. Filter Free Radio.
Filter Free Radio with Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Jacob Dean.
With Jacob Dean and Skeptical Scott.
Spread the responsibility. We're all in this together, right? You and me and Joe and Mary and whoever, we're all in this together. So spread the responsibility around. Students, get active and strike on education issues. Journalists, challenge corporate censorship of the truth and the real issues that we're facing today. Police officials, refuse to impose orders that you know to be immoral or wrong.
Or illegal.
Or illegal, right? Torturing, that's bad.
FilterFreeRadio.com.
You never know who or what you'll hear when you listen to the Nicole Sandler Show at RadioOrNot.com.
Your view is not being represented in this country because all of our views have been corrupted by money in politics. Remember, 94% of the time, the candidate who raises the most money wins.
That's the fact that we need to drive home constantly. It's all about the money. Dylan Radigan, you rock.
The Nicole Sandler Show, live Monday through Thursdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, or podcast anytime.
7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's one every 26 seconds. So here's a 26-second message of encouragement.
Hi, I'm Stacy. Look, I've been there. It's tough. And I just want to say, if you find yourself feeling negative, use it as motivation. Let it be like the fuel in the fire to keep you going. Because the best is yet to come. Seriously, you're capable of great things you probably haven't even dreamed of yet. So don't quit now. See you at graduation.
Do you have 26 seconds to convince a student to stay at their desk? Now you can share your message of support at boostup.org. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step. Brought to you by the U.S. Army and the Ad Council.
Hey, Dad, how do you throw a curveball? How do you build a fort? How do refrigerators run? How do fish learn how to swim?
Kids ask a lot of questions.
How high can you jump?
But you don't have to know every answer.
How many phone numbers are there?
Because you don't have to be perfect to be a perfect parent.
How do cell phones work?
There are thousands of children in foster care who don't need every question answered.
What's electricity?
They just need you.
What's the moon made of?
For more information on how you can adopt, go to adoptuskids.org. A public service announcement from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
The most important online radio station. It's easier than ever to listen to SoFlo. On the air and everywhere. On any computer, any mobile device, iPhone, iTouch, and anywhere you are, just hit SoFloRadio.com. Tell your friends about South Florida's radio network, SoFloRadio.com.
Welcome back to Talking Left with me, Danielle and Shano. Thank you wherever you are listening. SoFlo Radio, RadioOrNot.com, Progressive Blend, or of course, We Act Radio, 1480 AM in Washington, D.C. We're speaking with Jacob Dean. He's the host of Filter Free Radio. You can check it out at filterfreeradio.com. And it's an awesome, fun, inspirational show to listen to. You definitely don't want to miss it. Jacob, we've been talking a lot about politicians and people being low information, not following politics quite enough. And we found a list of politicians and potential politicians who were in the running, which we feel if perhaps people had paid attention to names like these, they'd focus on politics a little bit more. I'm sure you're intrigued by that intro.
Bring it on. I want to hear this.
Yes, there's an article up on the Huffington Post, which is not a site we often quote, but it's the most unfortunate politicians' names of all times. And there are many more on this list that we are not able to mention on this show due to FCC compliance, but we picked out a few to give you the general idea, like James Bond, who was running for school board, and Jay Walker, who was running for county tax assessor. Do you think with names like that, people may pay more attention to politics, Jacob?
Oh, I got to tell you a real quick story. Not our current mayor, but the mayor that preceded our current mayor here in Portland, Oregon. His name was Sam Adams. And I honestly believe, because I know for a fact, I have at least one friend who voted for Sam Adams purely because that was his name. I know that for a fact.
So think back down to South Carolina at a recent election, Al Green.
Yeah, that's true.
Al Green.
Right.
Al Green.
Well, and perhaps
not the crooner. No.
Perhaps your friends then would have also voted for young Boozer, who was running for county treasurer.
Did I mention Sam Adams won and was the mayor?
Really?
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. I
like the judge.
The judge, Lawless, for
Judge
county
Lawless.
judge.
Judge Lawless.
Yeah,
That's
some of my
Oh,
favorites.
really?
Some of my favorites people will have to go look up because again they are not compliant. But you had one of the top ones was Frank Schmuck, who was running for city council,
Dear Lord.
and yes, Shotwell for sheriff.
Shotwell.
I think that's actually Joe Arpaio's nickname.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
But I love Lawless and Shotwell. Those just stand out as awesome.
Yes, but they are unfortunate. There's actually 33 up on the list that Huffington Post has, and again, we can't mention.
And let's
all
just say Richard, not a good first name for politics.
Yes, especially
think about it.
Yeah, especially with the last name like Ball, like Lucille Ball, but first name Richard. So.
Yeah.
We can't get too far into this, which is it's just too much fun. But yeah, some of these are on the edge of whether or not we can say them on the radio, which is interesting because I'd like to know how those campaign commercials work.
Right.
They would be fine if they're a person's name, quite honestly. It's just we don't want to turn into a Howard Stern bit here.
No.
I wonder,
Jacob,
has anyone ever gone to the extent to change their name before they ran to office to combat something like that? That would be interesting to know.
I don't know. Shane is using the Google machine furiously over there.
I don't know. Maybe they didn't plan it out far enough in advance.
Yes, but well, they can't all be fortunate enough to have a cool name like Jacob Dean. But Jacob, before we have to wrap things up, what's coming up tomorrow on your show, and what can people expect if they tune in to listen?
We've got a jam-packed show tomorrow. Scott and I are going to go through a really brilliant new short film that was put out by Studio Canoe. It's on our home page at filterfreeradio.com. It's called Obey. It's a short film based off of Chris Hedges' Death of the Liberal Class, which I think is a fascinating topic. Also, I'm going to be getting into a little personal story that I'm fighting the local water company Gestapo, and I want to actually call to light a little legal extortion practices put on by my local water company here. I'm going to share an experience with that, and also some recent news about how this water company is apparently overcharging some users and allocating those funds for other projects, which I guess they're not supposed to be doing. So we're going to bring some new stuff to light on Monday, and I hope you guys can check it out.
Absolutely, and that is at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific on filterfreeradio.com or radioornot.com, and always available on YouTube as well, where you guys are getting a lot of awesome hits over there, too. All the links will be up with the show and soon to be available in an iTunes podcast, so I hear.
Because the magics of awesome people, super duper awesome people, hopefully, fingers crossed.
Within 24 hours.
Oh, you're the best.
Yes. So soon people could go and check it out in audio podcast form as well, like they can Talking Left over at talkingleft.com. Now, our podcasts have no commercials, so it makes it easier to download and easier to listen to. Yes.
It's about time.
Yes. Well, you're giving yourself an applause over there since you did all the work.
Well, actually, I listened to it, too, and I'm glad they're not there either.
So we want to make sure to thank our great guests, Jacob Dean. Go and check out his show right now at filterfreeradio.com. And David Schoen, the counsel for the ACLU of Alabama, fighting the good fight to keep voters protected in Alabama and throughout the country. Also want to thank Nicole Sandler of RadioOrNot.com, George Rodriguez of SoFlo Radio, of course, Rocky Mountain Mike for our amazing intro music, and everybody over at We Act Radio, Alex Lawson, Kimon Freeman, Pete Callahan, Daniel Marins, David Schuster, Rich Webster, and anybody else I'm sure I'm missing over there. They are amazing, and we are very thankful for them. Want to thank everybody who downloads the podcast for free over on iTunes and, of course, subscribes to our YouTube channel. And thank you for listening. You're the reason we do what we do, and we will be back next week. If you're listening over on We Act Radio, stay tuned for Mark Levine. He'll be coming up next.